Good evening and welcome. This is the May 21st, 2025 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses including plan development, zoning relief, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will make either a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Could you please call the roll, Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Aravallo, Commissioner Berlin,
Here.
Commissioner Harris-Furry,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Mabadi,
Here.
Commissioner Mangum, Commissioner Mudinchev, Commissioner Patel,
Here.
and Chair Lindwall.
Here. With 6 members present, we have a quorum. Also present tonight from city staff are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, Planning Manager Liz Williams, Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs Manager Allison Leipziger, and Community Development Director Sarah Flax, and Planning and Policy Supervisor Aaron Baines. This is a formal hearing, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time out of respect to the presenter, the audience, and the Land Use Commission, and so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. The chair will determine the time allocated to each speaker based on the number of speakers signed up. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the provided comment sheet. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal before us this evening. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Our hearings for the comprehensive plan vary slightly from our regular meeting structure. This public hearing is designed to receive testimony from the residents, business owners, and other interested parties on this important document. Tonight's meeting will be about the comp plan only. Public testimony, as I think all of you know, was closed on April 4th, and we are now in the deliberation phase of the public hearing. Deliberations began at our April 16th meeting and will continue this evening. That means we do not expect to reopen the hearing for public testimony tonight, although, as always, there is time for public comment at the end of the meeting. If commissioners decide that additional public testimony is needed, we can vote to reopen testimony, although I would ask that any such testimony be limited to the edits that have been made by the Land Use Commission. I would also like to clarify that the document before us tonight is not a 3.0 version of the draft plan, as some people may believe. What we have before us is the text from the February draft that includes edits agreed to on April 16th. The document may look a bit different, but the language has not been changed from that draft, except to the extent that changes and edits were made at our last meeting. I'd also like to remind everyone that the scope of our charge is narrow. We are responsible for holding a public hearing that addresses the current plan draft and to recommend specific changes that we believe the City Council should consider. It's not within our purview to opine as to how the planning process has unfolded. It will be up to the City Council to determine how best to move forward with finalizing the comprehensive plan and what comes next with respect to zoning and other development regulations once the Land Use Commission has completed its work. I'd also like to just, again, clarify that the intent is for us to complete our deliberations tonight and make a recommendation to the City Council moving forward. And in making our recommendation, we that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to, kind of as was the format of the last meeting, I've prepared a set of suggested edits and clarifications for staff and proposed language that, I had suggested that's been circulated to the Land Use Commission for consideration. And just with respect to my fellow commissioners, I'm not wedded to anything that I've proposed in this. So feel free to challenge, recommend that it not be included and make any edits. But what we need to do is we need to go through and make recommendations. We need to vote on those recommendations and at the end of the day, take a vote on whether or not the recommendation to the city council should be a positive one or a negative one, and also to identify additional conditions if we feel that there are elements that should be considered and included in the final draft plan. We can make those recommendations as conditions to our recommendation. So with that, does anyone have any questions before we get started? Okay. And I think there are copies for the public as well available. But basically, I've organized the discussion into several categories. The first are basic. I think the other thing I wanted to mention, I think there may be a little confusion in the public with respect to, there was the original packet with the plan document was distributed on May 16th as part of our normal thing. And there is a revised packet that was posted, I believe, Monday, I'm sorry, that includes some very minor clarifications and corrections. And if staff could kind of provide just a general overview, I don't think it's going to impact what we're doing tonight, but I think it would be helpful to just make sure that everyone is aware that there have been, that we are dealing with a slightly different version of the draft. So if somebody could kind of explain what those changes were, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair Linwall. So these were very minor edits, just some copy-paste problems. First and foremost was updating the year in which the Preservation Commission was first commissioned. That was changed from 1978 to 1975. There was a set of policy statements in the housing chapter, so chapter 10. It was a brief summary that just listed all of the different actions and policies that are in the body of that text. That did not reflect the changes that we had made, so that's just been updated now. And then there were a couple word changes that were proposed by the Preservation Commission for the requested additions on their behalf.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, Jean, the comments that you distributed to us, we're going to be working through tonight, that was based on version 2 of the packet?
It was based on the first version of the packet.
Are the page numbers any different?
I don't know. They might be toward the end, but I think they're generally,
Okay.
they shouldn't have changed more than a page, maybe.
Okay.
But yes, I was working with the Friday version of the packet.
Okay.
And presumably, we're going to continue working with the Friday version of the packet, since that's the only one I've seen, and while these sound minor, I haven't seen that other version.
Yeah, I think that we can work with the Friday version of the packet, I believe. Any other questions? Okay, well, the first batch of edits and corrections really were simply corrections. The first is in the kind of the describing the process in terms of the meetings. There's a reference to EC2 EC2C, which is, I believe, Evanston Cradle to Career. And I think just somewhere in the beginning of the document, when you're talking about that, there probably ought to be an introductory sentence that acknowledges their assistance in community outreach, and then you can use the initials and parentheses so we know so nothing else much needs to change.
Can I clarify that the page numbers you're referring to are the
On
are
the versions,
are the PDF page numbers?
I think so, yes. Should be
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
It's 6 of it's whatever, 6 on the draft. There.
That's 5.
Okay, then it's on the next one. So you can see up here where, it just.
Oh, I found it up here too.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just a minor thing. And
Okay.
then on pages 12 to 16 of the document, there are just some formatting. Sure. And I would note, while people are looking, that our Commissioner Magnum has joined us, and you didn't miss much.
I see. So it is the page numbers listed in the
document.
pages, yeah, okay.
Also,
Well, that's,
so that's then all the edits.
okay, so Gene, I'd suggest that if you're gonna, when you talk about some edit, that you say what page you're on, that we can.
Okay.
go there. That
All right.
Okay.
Also, it seems like we're starting with your suggested edits, but I feel like these are new. It might be helpful, like, are we going to go through the edits that they made? In my mind, I'm thinking about this as there's one set of edits, which we all talked about in April, and the city staff was tasked with implementing, right? And so my assumption was we would go through those, and then either sort of part 2, we talk about your concerns, Chair, or maybe through that discussion, your concerns come up. But it seems like we should work through what we had asked to change before any new content, right? I mean, personally, that's my preference.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I was commenting off the version that Aaron had made updates on that I was looking at that was in. So that's what I was working with. This is separate from that, which is slightly different.
Right. I guess the first question would be, do people have issues or comments on the edits?
That
Right.
from Friday then.
Friday is what I'm working with right now.
So what we were sent on Friday was, as I understand it, the comp plan 2.0 that was revised based on the conversation we had at a public hearing, I think on April, whatever that date was, 16th, right? And so my understanding was tonight, the document that everyone had access to on Friday, beginning on Friday, has those edits tracked in different colors in different sections, and those colored edits are what we had asked to have changed. So my understanding was this evening we would discuss whether or not the edits had been made correctly and if we had concerns, right? And through that, maybe some of these things you want to talk about will get addressed, and if not, maybe we can come back to them. But I think to just sidestep all of the edits we had asked I would be surprised.
Are there edits, like the blue edits, that you want to discuss that you feel were not picked up according to what we approved?
I think I found a handful that I was surprised about and wanted to discuss, but I mean, wasn't,
Okay. Well, then-
and some of them probably overlap with some of what Jean has listed. But I mean, I thought that was the point of this evening, was to make sure the feedback we had requested had been implemented effectively, because we had felt like, okay, we're moving forward with draft 2, so here are the things we want to see changed, and then we can move forward. And so I thought tonight was to be like, do we see those things changed? Are they changed correctly? Are they changed incorrectly?
Okay, we can start.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we can start with that. I mean, I think that the other piece that we were asked to do was to identify language that we thought should be incorporated into the draft, kind of like we had done with the policy and action edits. So I think that, but the point is, we need to vote on that language tonight so that something can be forwarded to the city council. A document can be forwarded to the city council with whatever edits that we propose.
So, Gene, suggestion is maybe we go through this Google Doc with the changes that Aaron has already posted up from our prior meeting. And then if we want, that'd be round
That's the-
one, and then round two, off the same document, we can incorporate the changes inside the Google Doc on the fly, because I've already made some changes or additions that I thought might be relevant. So maybe just work off of one footprint rather than having two different. That's my suggestion. You guys.
Right, like round one being the edits we had already asked to have made. Like, let's work through the edits we'd asked to have made, which is round one. And then additionally, any other concerns that don't get addressed through discussing round one.
Okay.
And maybe it's as simple as like chapter one, does anyone have any concerns about any edits? Like, I don't know that we have to go, page 4, the
Okay.
word broadly was
All right,
inserted,
but the point is, we do need to agree on specific language for the change.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
That's fine. Okay, all right. Is that that kind of the consensus on how people would like to proceed?
Yeah, I don't have the Google Doc version, I just have the PDF, so is that
Try to fix it.
okay, or?
I only have a PDF.
What?
It's only a PDF, isn't it?
I think it's only PDF. It should be just on the,
The PDF is what we should be using.
yes, just the PDF.
The packet,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so, that doesn't matter to me, it's just a question of process. So if we're working off the PDF, then the changes, how will you manifest any changes that we decide as a group? Are you just gonna write it down? Yeah, cool. Yeah. So Aaron, should I ask the question again? Yes. Okay, so if you're saying that all this conversation about using the Google Doc, you're saying don't do that, use the PDF. So if we use the PDF, then the changes that we are going to, well, first, does a PDF that we're using reflect the changes in the Google Doc? Second, if we're going to be making adjustments to the PDF, how does that even occur in this forum tonight? How will that information be collated and accumulated? How will you do that?
So to give folks a little perspective, the PDF that is in your packet is color coded. So anything that is light blue are those items that you voted on at our last meeting in April to change, reword, or add additional policies to. If it is a dark blue, that was something from the Preservation Commission, which was blanket approved by this commission. And then anything in green is from the Environmental Board, which was also blanket approved from this commission.
So, part two, that's work that's been done.
Yes.
No, I have that, so let's assume we all have the same document. If we're gonna make it, oh, sorry. I thought my voice would carry. If we're going to be making any changes tonight, how is that going to be of record? So we'd be by motion?
Yes, we would advise that the commissioners make a motion to amend this document.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that's simple.
And again, we need to have specific language so that staff can incorporate the language. All right? All right, so I guess we'll go chapter by chapter? That's
If that
fine.
works for you.
I think, again, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so any issues with chapter 1, introduction?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Okay, this is, bear with me to get the correct page here. The paragraph this is page 1, the paragraph that starts with envision Evanston 2045 is a community-driven process, blah, 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 blah. The plan, okay, it's the sentence that says, this initiative seeks to reflect a shared vision for the future of Evanston, addressing key areas such as, and we had discussed at the last meeting, I mean, I know I had brought it up, about changing that list to match the chapter titles. So instead of, key areas such as, and then a bunch of things, to say key areas such as neighborhood and land uses, community assets and infrastructure, transportation, environment, parks and recreation, to make that match the list of the chapters, just so it
Change the chapter titles.
yeah, so that where it says right now, racial equity, affordable housing, climate change, and arts and culture, to take that out and make it the list of chapter titles that come later in the plan. And I honestly can't remember if we voted on that specific thing or if that was on the consent agenda or whatever, but I just noticed that wasn't, I don't know, that change wasn't reflected.
Is there discussion or a motion? Or are people good with this list as it is?
I'm okay with the list as is. I think it reflects what the entire document is about.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, it's just a such as statement.
I'm also fine with it.
I'm good.
Okay, I don't think we have a second for the change, so we'll leave it as is.
My items in chapter 1 are on page 6. So if anyone has something before that, let me know. Otherwise, I'll jump in.
Okay, well, that's chapter 2.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. I'm just
So
so...
nothing else for chapter 1.
Apologies.
Okay, chapter 2. Go ahead.
All right, so my first one on page 6 is in the box housing satisfaction, just a request instead of using EC2C that we spell out that program name so that future readers understand what we're talking about. On the last box in that chart, perception of new development, I was a little concerned about the language in the last bullet. White respondents less positive about neighborhood integration and design. I'm not sure what we're getting at there with neighborhood integration. Like, I suspect that the potential misreadings of that sentence aren't what we want in a public document about our city. So happy to wordsmith on that. But it basically sounds like white residents are less positive about integrating neighborhoods, which so I just wanted to flag. I had concerns about that language. Similarly, on page 7, and this could be a complete misreading by me, but the last bullet point also, I was a little confused. Admittedly, I did not participate in a focus group or survey, but there's this list of topics, and it's jobs and economy, development, community design. These are all things you would think, and then it's Evanston's Black community, which also gave me pause as a strange topic that would be listed. So I wanted to flag those. And I don't know how we're doing this, Chair, if we want like responses or like, should I?
Talk about it.
Yeah.
You should make a motion.
Chair Linwell?
Well, yes.
I also identified the same concern on page 6. The white residents less positive about neighborhood integration and design. Do you want me to suggest an
Yeah, if
alternate?
you've got-
Because I had, do I make the motion or do I
You can
suggest
make-
it? and
Yeah,
say, okay.
you can make a motion, and then
Okay.
if it doesn't get a second, then it's.
Got it.
Then
Okay.
it is dropped. How about that?
I had drafted as an alternate, so white, so change it to white respondents less positive about neighborhood design changes to the built environment. Because I think that gets more at the spirit of what was collected in these focus groups. And I think that gets away from this mischaracterization that the white residents are reluctant to having racial integration, which I really don't think was what was something that came out of the focus groups. So again, the motion to change that bullet point to white respondents less positive about neighborhood design changes to the built environment.
I'm trying to formulate my thoughts. Did you and I don't mean this accusatory, I'm genuinely curious from work on the work I've seen on how you summarize the survey results. Did you read the survey results to come up with that language? The reason I ask is because depending on the survey, how the survey was written, this is potentially the correct framing or language, now that I'm thinking about it. I know I'm contradicting myself, but I'm just curious where your suggestion came from, right?
From the distillation of the public comment, from reading the materials that we've gotten from city staff, I mean, if the spirit of the responses to these public input sessions were about integration and white respondents being reluctant to integration, I stand corrected. It doesn't seem likely.
This is
This is
from-
about perception of new development and whether or not that new development is integrating into the neighborhood that it is in from a design and character standpoint. So just to give context to maybe help in aiding you all redraft this, it's really about new development not fitting the neighborhood context. So maybe neighborhood context could be a better choice than integration, but it's really new development. White respondents felt that it was not integrating into the built form of neighborhoods and compatible with the surrounding land uses. Does that help?
Integration is kind of a trigger word that I
Agreed.
think there's a place for it. If you just reversed and said design integration, then you might have a clearer understanding of what you're saying. But integration and design sound like two things, not one.
Or integration of new development, so you're defining what that integration is,
Right.
rather than just leaving it on its own.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So integration, less positive about integration of new development in existing neighborhoods, or just in neighborhoods?
In neighborhoods.
I would be much more comfortable with that language.
We need a motion.
I move to adopt the language. Jean, can you say it again, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, can you say it again?
No. White respondents less positive about integration of new development in neighborhoods, into neighborhoods, probably.
I motion to accept that language.
Second.
Can I have a voice vote, I think? I don't know that any opposed to that? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that change is made. And then your second point was about discussion of Evanston's Black community and the focus groups. I did attend all of the focus groups, and I don't remember, perhaps I'm mistaken, but I don't remember that being a discussion. It's up, you've gone past it. There. I don't remember that being a discussion item at the focus groups, but I could be wrong.
I can. So that one was not a part of the couple of days of focus groups.
Right.
There was a group of residents who approached the consultant about having an additional focus group that spoke to the interest of the Black community.
Okay.
So it was something that was
Done
added,
separate.
Yeah.
Okay, that's,
So I think we should just have that context there,
Well, I think-
that there was an additional focus group, at the request of community
actually,
members.
no,
or-
that's, no, it says that there were 9 focus groups, and we're not talking about who attended which one necessarily in this, so I think
Okay, okay.
that language is fine. Okay, anything else in chapter 2?
I have one, just trying to toggling between two.
Yeah.
There was the one, I'm not sure what page it's on the question about education. One second.
I could just remind commissioners to make sure your microphones are on and you're speaking into mics, otherwise folks at home won't hear you.
So it was, there was an alternative, protect R1 zoning, and
Which page?
that's the question. I'm trying to find that. Well, it's zoning and development, so let's find zoning and development.
So it would be on page 11.
Yes. So the alternative was protect R1 zoning, and the current was examine R1 zoning. And I said, keep existing, is what I said. I didn't want to change that. That was my comment in support of the change. Now, I don't know if is that even relevant at this point? If it's already been changed, I don't need to
With all due respect, that was something that the commission voted on, so the language
That's fine.
that.
I can't remember all these votes. That's cool. Okay, so we can just move on then. All right. Thank
Okay.
you. Let me so chapter 2, I think I'm all set with chapter 2.
Chair, can I ask a technical question? On the bottom of page 11, the last bullet that's on that page, and then it runs onto the top of page 12, it says, under zoning and development, some expressed support for creating a more neighborhood-oriented approach to zoning, while others expressed opposition, wanting a more flexible approach. I'm unclear on what a more flexible approach would look like, and this is not about changing language in the plan, but I just want to understand, like, what is that saying? What would a more flexible approach to zoning be?
I'm going to defer to staff because they unfortunately were given the task of trying to consolidate the long lists of bullet points that were in the first draft.
That was actually also curated by this commission at its last meeting, and that was something that was wordsmithed by the commission, voted on and approved.
Yeah, I'm. Do you have a sense for what we meant by that?
I think it was finding a happy medium in terms of the use of the word character and folks that would like to see changes to the zoning code.
Thank you.
Since we're wordsmithing, should we just say some express support for creating, because we've got.
Wait, but if that was already, if we
Okay.
already
All
voted
right.
on that,
All right,
we're
then
not relitigating the things
You're
that
right.
were already voted on
Okay.
last time.
All right. That's fine.
And for the things like spelling out EC2C, like we don't need to take votes on that. That will just
I
happen.
I hope that can just happen, I think. I think we need to just talk about, specific language. So I'm going to defer to my fellow commissioners about, since we did kind of vote on some of this language, I had suggested on page 9, under the land use, to consider adding a bullet point, which, was discussed at length at many of our meetings, which would be to recognize the contribution of Evanston's single-family housing stock to Evanston's community identity.
Sorry, which page?
It would be on page 9 under land use, just a last bullet point.
I think, though, to the point on not relitigating things, I think we considered that last time and didn't vote for it, because that language was shown before the April 16th meeting, right? That was one of the language options we had.
That whole section is actually reflected in the Land Use Commission feedback section, so it is already represented
Okay.
in those comments.
All right, that's
Okay.
fine, then
My only thing in terms of things we voted on page 15 in chapter 2 where it says support and grow museums, I think we ultimately included, just ruled that, or voted that we would do support and not include and grow, just in the spirit of not overcommitting, like we don't know what the museum community is going to look like.
And on that particular bullet point, kind of going back to one of just the formatting things that I have in my little list would be to have a, something like recognize cultural amenities, and then it can be support Evanston's museum community. And that's just a consistency thing, because everything in this section has like engage the public, the community, and then it's got the statement.
So those are also highlighted in key themes at the end of the chapter.
No, this is just a formatting issue. I'm just suggesting a formatting. It's just consistent formatting. That's all I'm not trying to add anything.
I had one more also. Under community systems, it was asked to clarify if this is for K through 12 students or only or universities. That was a question that was in the notes. It was in the other one. So I wanted to clarify that from my standpoint, I think it should be K through 12 for this prioritize student needs, employ student-centered decision-making across educational institutions. The question was if it was applying to the university as well or just K through 12, and I would say K through 12.
Where is this?
Top of page 13.
Yep.
Okay.
Prioritize student needs.
Ah,
No, yeah. His mic's on. So I guess I would motion to employ student-centered decision-making across educational institutions that are K through 12.
are you looking at just District 65 and District 202?
Right.
Okay, well, why don't we just,
Oh, yeah, we could just say that too. Employ student-centered decision-making across educational institutions in District 65 and 202.
or just say across, in District 65 and 202?
Okay.
Second.
That's
Okay.
fine.
So, yes.
Any discussion?
Oh, discussion. I'm sorry.
I mean, Evanston has Northwestern University here, and they have students too, so why not include them?
I think he's expressly not including them.
Right.
Right. Well, by saying K through 12, then you're excluding them, right?
Well, I guess I look at this as Northwestern is almost kind of like Skokie in some ways. Like they have their own budget, their own taxing, their own internal revenue body. We have our own taxing body here, our own infrastructure. We charge back to them things that we offer, like, water and fire, whatever. So like when it comes to like our deployment of resources, I think that the taxpayers are not paying anything for Northwestern, but they're paying everything for our schools. So I'm focusing our energy on applying our oversight to that. That was my reason. I have nothing against, I love Northwestern, but I don't think it's appropriate for this.
Commissioner Mubadi, I would like to remind you that this is in Chapter 2, which is what we heard. So this is the sentiments of community engagement.
I did that last time. That's right. So I withdraw.
Okay. Just while we're on this chapter, in terms of just the basic edits on neighborhoods and places, there is the first, let's see, find the one. It's on page, again, page 12, I think.
Yes.
There's, the last bullet is establish an urban design commission, and I'm just suggesting that at the beginning, we just say guide change, So just to introduce that, again, just as a matter of consistency. What? Yes, and I'd like to make, well, let me make the other ones, and then we can, so there's that one on getting around. There is a statement, I think it's the next to the last bullet, which is work with transit agencies. And again, I would just like to have the beginning phrase be coordinate with transit providers, colon, and then the sentence is fine. And under environment, the last bullet, I would just like that to start with embrace the lakefront, colon. And I think I mentioned the museums. I would like to say recognize cultural amenities, colon. And then I guess for the sake of making a motion, I will also, in that particular one, take out and grow. So it just says recognize cultural amenities, colon, support Evanston's museum community. And I will make a motion for those particular changes.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, anything else in Chapter 2? Okay, moving on to Chapter 3.
Chair
Evans-
Linwell?
Yes.
Do you want to start? I have something
Yeah.
in chapter 3.
Oh,
Or-
I'm
go.
just asking for, no, I don't need to start.
all right, so in chapter 3, this is page, it's the page that says who we are today on it. Figure out which page that is.
19?
19, yes, 19, thank you. All right, so according to my notes last time, I brought this, I brought this up, but we didn't vote on it. And my suggestion was that that first section, this is everything between who we are today to the subheading of population and density. And I had suggested, and I had submitted written suggestion in the Google Doc to delete that section and replace it with a paragraph that states, this section draws from reliable sources such as the United States Census. Here, data on Evanston demographics is presented with that of Cook County as well as neighboring municipalities of Wilmette, Chicago, Lincolnwood, and Skokie. Additionally, data from specific Chicago zip codes that border Evanston 60626 and 60654 are included. These zip codes are roughly conterminous with the Chicago community areas of Rogers Park and West Ridge. Finally, Oak Park is also included because it is similar to Evanston in terms of current built environment and historical development. For information on undercounted and overcounted population subsets, see, and then a link to the census website where they talk about population overcounts and undercounts. And that, I see that's kind of similar language to Madam Chair, what you recommended on this second page, this page 19, consider replacing the first two paragraphs of the following text, making the data disclaimers a footnote. Information on a variety of demographic, housing, and economic characteristics is compiled by the U.S. Census Bureau, updated annually in the American Community Survey. The consistent format allows comparison along communities and analysis of trends over time. So my recommended change that I put in April is kind of in the spirit of what
Right.
you're saying here. Mine's a little bit wordier. Sorry.
That's fine.
But, and the reason why I bring that up again, and I guess I'm asking for consideration from us, is that, you know, this Who We Are Today chapter is the demographics chapter. And the demographic chapter basically starts out by saying, oh, well, not really, it reads kind of as backwards to me, and it puts the focus on, you know, the 0.5%, 1.5% undercount, overcounts that exist, rather than the focus on, we get our data from these sources, these are the best available sources. And then the footnote, undercounts, overcounts exist of 1.5% in some cases. That's really footnote material for reading a demographic report. So my suggestion from last time, which I guess we never really took up, is to delete that first half of the page and replace it with a paragraph that talks about where the data comes from, and then directing people, if they're interested in undercount, overcount, go to the census and read their publication.
Thoughts? Commissioner Magnet.
I think we should include both, but not as a footnote, basically put his paragraph before this and then keep this same section here.
So I think this section is really important. That's already here. There is a problem with it though, because it kind of reads like it's like a mission-oriented section of people that are either undercounted, disenfranchised, having some challenges with some issue like income, language, and that's an aspect of who we are. That's part of who we are, but it's not who we are. Who we are is that and everything else. To what you were talking about, where the demographic data is readily available, and I think that paragraph should go first, and this should be identified as like what we have here, a difficult time keeping records, hard to count populations, which include bing, 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 like that. I think that would be more defining of Evanston to include, but to also acknowledge that it's to include with everything else that's there too, that the demographic data would provide if you so wanted to see it. So that's kind of, I agree with you.
Anybody else? I think, obviously, since I suggested making this a footnote, that while it's important, the question is how big an issue is it in Evanston? It's certainly an issue nationally, and it may be an issue in Evanston. And I'm happy to have this as a footnote, but I think it's more a footnote material than it is anything else. But I certainly think that we ought to at least acknowledge that the data comes from reliable sources. And I'm happy with, Commissioner Johnson's language as well. It just kind of makes this section a lot longer than maybe it needs to be. I think that's my other concern.
Well,
It's a paragraph. I mean, just one paragraph. I would I just top it off with with a variation of
can I make
paragraph.
Can I make a motion
The
just
motion.
to, I guess a formal motion here,
Yes.
to right after who we are today, that heading, and right before when reviewing census data, to add that paragraph that I suggested, and to keep the rest of the page the same as
Second.
Yep.
this. Okay.
Okay. And I would like to note for the record that Commissioner Arevalo has joined us. Welcome. Okay. We have a motion moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I trust you have that particular language, so we don't need to do anything else. Okay,
I
great.
don't want you to have to pick through the recording to get that. It's already in the Google Doc, so.
Okay. Anything else on that chapter? I have, go ahead, Commissioner Berlin.
So this may be another one where we asked for this, in which case apologies in advance. On page 28 of this chapter. I was just surprised with the specificity of the edit about not simply adding a stop on the CTA line, but on the yellow line of the CTA. Did we actually talk about the yellow line by name?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I really,
It was a late night.
I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize.
But I do have another suggested language change on, I guess it's under households on page 19. Oh, where am I? Oh, yeah, under households, which reads, Evanston has a relatively high number of smaller households, particularly 1- and 2-person households. And then it goes, this is likely because students and young professionals are drawn to the city's urban amenities, closeness to Chicago, and presence of Northwestern University. I would suggest adding a sentence that there are also large numbers of senior households, many of which have downsized and moved from other communities to Evanston, drawn by its housing stock and community amenities. I would make that motion.
I'll second that motion, if that's
Okay.
a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And
Chair Lenoir?
Yes.
Can I mention something on that same passage? And I don't, I don't know how you want to handle this, how you want to productively take this comment, but at the last, in April when we submitted our edits, and one of the things that I mentioned in the meeting that came after that was that particularly throughout this chapter, when a piece of data is given, to always give the context, because, like, for example here, Evanston has a relatively high number of smaller households. Relative to what? So to give the context, and that to give the number instead of the subjective description of the number. So Evanston has this number of smaller households, which is higher than, Chicago, whatever, Rogers Park, Wilmette, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, looking in the paragraph above that, so under population and density, so Evanston has a population density of 9,840 people per square mile. And I can tell you, to the vast majority of the population, that number means nothing. I bet if I asked 100 people on the street from across the United States, what's the population density of the town you live in? I bet no one could tell me, because there aren't a lot of professional urban planners, demographers just walking around. And so I had suggested that every time there is I'd suggest in this paragraph, Evanston, located just north of Chicago, has a population density of 9,840 people per square mile. In comparison, Cook County has 5,419 people per square mile. And I know we're going to get some of that in the tables in the appendix, but the appendices aren't ready, right?
no, the appendices that we're doing with the data tables, those are ready and done because they were part of the,
Okay, and those are the finished ones that okay.
right.
And I appreciate the appendices and the data tables, but I don't know, I read this second version as still having, from a kind of scientific demography perspective, language that in many places is subjective and lacks context. And I'm not going to go through and point out every single one of them in this paragraph, or in this chapter, but it's just it's those two aspects of this chapter throughout this chapter still. I don't know. I'm still not satisfied with the quality of this as far as sending this on to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that.
General comment.
Okay, and I think that, I don't think we have the time or bandwidth to go through and make, real substantive edits. I think it could be part of a recommendation that one of the things that you'd like the council to incorporate into the next, draft would be more, a fuller, narrative or consider a revised neighborhood narrative. But the reality is, we need to send something to the recommendation to the council with specific language. And I don't think we want to create any more work and time and effort for staff than is necessary. That's why we're focusing on specific language tonight and specific edits. So I think that I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I when I'm reading it, I'm kind of generally okay with the language as it's presented. I don't know about how the rest of the commissioners feel, but I'm okay for now moving that language along. However, that being said, one of the things that I would like to suggest be incorporated, or that we ask that the city council consider including in the final version of the draft, would be under the housing, the bedroom mix. There were two tables. We have the comparison on the number of bedrooms, and the tables were prepared and sent to us back in January, I think, that described the bedroom mix for owner housing and rental housing. And those tables are somewhere in a packet that had been prepared. And I would like, one of the things when we get to our, final recommendations that I'm going to suggest is that those tables be incorporated into the data tables, just to provide extra information. Commissioner Johnson, you have anything? No? Not Johnson.
My commissioner's point about the density, the one thing you could possibly consider adding is you could end this with a comment specifically pointing out that the city of Evanston's eastern border runs along a body of water, which in effect, you can't count that water, any of that water, as part of parkland and it serves as parkland in some ways. You have use there that goes into the water. So like you don't have, it's not part of the boundary, the use of that water is not part of the boundary of Evanston. So that average is somewhat impacted by the fact that you have a couple miles of land that just suddenly ends, that doesn't have any, it's almost like having, if you look, for example, at the design of a city as it shifts into another city, it's kind of like the density is kind of fairly homogeneous. Like if you looked at McCormick, on either side of McCormick, the lot sizes are recognizable. You have this thing going on, but in Evanston, it just ends. So what does that represent? It represents an ending, and that all that's there is park, and that park is, if you could go out 100 feet,
But the parkland isn't.
The park is part of it,
but it's included in the city of Evanston
No, I know
boundaries.
that.
So the population density is basically
I
population.
know, but if you had a body of water inside the city of Evanston, that would add to your average, whereas the body of water of Lake Michigan is not added to the average. So I don't know if there's any point commenting about the lake.
I think that we probably ought to, leave this section pretty much as it is, with the exception of the couple of changes we just made. Again, we're not trying to wordsmith we're trying to get the important key points that we believe should be either, changed, we can agree on text changes now. So I don't think, we don't want to be trying to draft, unless you want to sit and draft language, we're not gonna, I think we need to move on. Is there anything else in that section? I do have one thing under key metrics on page 23, which, speaking of population density, I think that is the wrong metric. I would rather see us use number of housing units, because population density is really a function of the number of housing units you have, or the total population divided by the number of let's see, if I get my formula right, but it's a function of how many housing units you have and what your population is, and really household size are the determining factors. So you could take the same number of housing units we have, if you added a person to every one of them, your housing density, population density would increase dramatically. And I just think in terms of a metric that could get tracked over time, the number of housing units would be a better metric, because the population density really, the number of the household size, number of people living in each household can fluctuate, where the number of housing units is kind of a constant. So that would be my recommendation for that.
Can we add it in addition to?
Yeah, you could. Although I think that the housing units is probably a better overall metric, but I would be happy to make a motion to add number of housing units as a metric.
I'll second that motion.
Okay? All in favor?
Aye.
Or just,
Aye.
thank you. Opposed? Okay. Sorry I missed discussion, but. Anything else?
Yeah, Chair Linwell, sorry to go back like
That's okay.
a couple pages, but it's just on page 20. It is the subsection called household income, second from the bottom of the page. I think this whole section is talking about income and not about wealth. So just a proposal to change the word. The city has a relatively higher income population compared to Chicago and Cook County, and is more economically diverse than suburbs like Wilmette. So in the first instance, change the word wealthy to higher income. The second instance, just delete the word wealthy, because the census and ACS track income, not persistent year-over-year wealth accumulation. So this, sorry to geek out, but it's just changing the term.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
So this is going to be, the city has a relatively higher income population compared to Chicago and Cook County, and is more economically diverse than suburbs like Wilmette.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor then, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Anything else with chapter 3? Okay, chapter 4. Right.
I think I found a typo on chapter 4.
Oh,
just,
okay, I think we can fix a typo.
All right. The subheading is invest in transportation options. Sorry, I'll tell you what page that is in a sec.
28?
Page 28. All right, the blue text. Eliminating greenhouse gas emissions through increasing active transportation by adding protected bike lanes, not lines, right?
Oh, you're
Okay.
right. And spell check wouldn't pick that up.
Right.
Okay, I presume we do not need a motion for that one.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to anything else in chapter 4? Okay, chapter 5. Okay, well, this is one where I have proposed, well, there are two things. I have proposed introductory language that would go on, it's into the beginning of page 30. And I will read it, and I would include it kind of after the fourth paragraph, so to kind of conclude that, and I'll read it. Evanston has a long history of proactively planning for its future. Approaches that have met our needs in the past may not be suited to the challenges that we will face in the future. The term place includes Evanston's built environment that has evolved over the last 150 years, along with the natural environmental features that help to define its context. For more than 100 years, Evanston has engaged in formal planning and zoning efforts intended to guide growth and development in a thoughtful and proactive way. Few places look like Evanston with its mix of low-density single-family neighborhoods and large urban-scale multifamily buildings. The question before us is how the built environment can continue to support community values and aspirations for the future. So I would.
Second.
Any discussion?
I support that addition. I had something similar written, but yours is better.
Thank you. And again, this is really kind of one of the things in just generally in reading this, I think that it's kind of important for all of the chapters that have policies and objectives to have something that kind of suggests objectives, like what we're trying to accomplish. And that's kind of what this paragraph is trying to get at. But, okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Chair Linwall, could
yes.
staff clarify something? So that suggestion had 2 paragraphs. Did you want to continue just the first one?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it does have 2 paragraphs. I apologize. Didn't flip my page. I'll read the second part and we can take a revote, or we can vote on this one separately. While the pace of development has varied from year to year, it has not stopped, nor would we want it to stop. New buildings and investment in existing ones have expanded Evanston's property tax base, which in turn has enabled the city to meet the service needs of residents. As new projects are proposed, the community has also worked to balance growth with maintaining the overall feel and identity that has come to define Evanston's evolving identity. Continuing to guide growth and development in a thoughtful way is critical to Evanston's success as a community. While residents are concerned with the look and feel of their neighborhoods as new buildings and uses are added, the City Council is also concerned with prioritizing financial transparency, forecasting, and identifying new revenue sources to support the services that residents have come to expect. So, have a second on the second paragraph.
I second.
Discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And then one more question, Chair. That said, those 2 paragraphs are to go after the 4th paragraph. Can you just clarify the paragraph starting words, language, that it would go ahead of?
Oh, I think it should go.
Could it close the section
It could
before
close,
it breaks
yes.
down the wards?
Yes, it can close the section.
Yeah.
That would be fine. I'd even be willing to leave that to the discretion of staff to put it where it's appropriate. On page 33 of the plan, the discussion of the 6th and 7th ward, just a note, and I guess, I don't know if we have to, I guess it doesn't necessarily need to get changed, but the basic Green Bay and Central intersection, the 6th ward says that the 6th ward includes the Central Street Business District. And it does include most of it, but the Green Bay and Central Business District is really in the 7th ward. So I'm just, wondering if we should clarify that. just to acknowledge that the 7th Ward has, the Central Street Business District is shared. So I guess I would make a motion that that language be clarified.
Can
If
you
that's
state the language you
Okay.
want added?
All right. The 6th Ward includes much of the Central Street Business District for the 6th Ward section, in the first sentence. And then I would add and maybe on the 7th Ward, you'd start it, centered on the Central Street and Green Bay Road Business District. Or it includes, let's see. Let me see if I can find a good place for it. How about in the second sentence, it offers a dynamic mix of dining and shopping experiences in the Green Bay and Central Street business area?
Sounds good.
Okay, so should I read that sentence again? It offers a dynamic mix of dining and shopping experiences in the Green Bay Road and Central Street business area and a variety of housing options. And then it goes on.
Is
Okay,
that a motion?
That's a motion.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So, Chair, I'm toggling between the Google Doc and the PDF, and I was looking at, on the PDF, if you go to open space on page 38, and you scroll down from open space, it goes to policies and actions. In the Google Doc, policies and actions is followed by support future development near transit and mixed-use areas, and it's all land use items, and that's not, it's not articulated the same way. In fact, it doesn't seem like it's there. Some of it's there, but it's just worded differently.
In terms of just the document you're looking at?
Well, for example,
Oh, you know what? I think maybe what the issue is it looks like campus, community, and open space, the text should come before the section on evaluating zoning proposals for consistency with the comprehensive plan. Is that? I just am noticing this.
No, what I'm noticing is in the PDF, the blue highlighted ones
Right.
are and I'm probably slow on the uptake on this one as well. The Google Doc is the alternate suggested alternate, and
No.
the original is not there. So we're looking at
We should be.
the alternate.
We should be looking at the packet from May 16th.
I know, I am. What happened was that I was working off the
Oh,
Google
the
Doc
old-
because
the
I was
old-
making comments there, so I'm jumping back and forth. And when I'm looking at the original text in both of them, they're a little bit different. Like NP 1.1 is actually LU 1.1, but the NP 1.1 text is the alternate text that's showed up in LU 1.1 in Google Doc. So
I think we voted on the alternate language.
what I'm
Yeah, I think because we did vote on some alternate language in those.
Okay, because it was open for comment, so I was like, okay, so, all right, so then if we voted on that, then.
Yeah, we voted on that, but I'm just looking at the document, and it appears, and this is again really minor, but we have the future land use map, and you've got residential, mixed use, downtown, creation and innovation, and then this section I've got is evaluating zoning proposals. So I think that for some reason, campus and open space just got moved. Because I think that section was supposed to conclude with the evaluating zoning proposals, was it not?
I think in the draft that was
Was it-
released in February with all of the charts and
Yeah.
the design aspects, the evaluating zoning proposals section was a separate call-out, so it was in a separate box. So I guess when things were copied and
Yeah.
dropped in here,
I think it just,
the
I think,
outlines is
I just
wrong
think
spot,
it
yeah.
got out of, it's just as out of sequence. There's, but,
And I also wanted to highlight, Commissioner Mabadi brought up a good point. We did change the names of those prefixes for the numbers so that they aligned with the new titles. They had not been updated yet.
yeah. And I've got two proposed changes or edits on, under campus community. Well, actually, the first one is under campus community. I believe at the end of the last sentence in that, talking about these campuses mostly operate with their own boundaries. Rules should allow flexibility to accommodate the changing needs of the community and emerging trends. And I would like to add the phrase, and while recognizing the potential impacts on adjacent neighborhoods, because I think it's really important that potential neighborhood impact be considered.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? And then under open space, there have been kind of questions about, on the future land use map, Calvary Cemetery is included in the open space category, and I think that we just need a sentence to explain why, and that's kind of typically done in a land use plan, and in my proposed language is Calvary Cemetery is included in the open space category because it provides semi-public green space that is unlikely to be redeveloped for other uses and provides habitat for birds and other fauna.
Second.
Okay? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Chair Lin-Wong, can I make one recommended edit in
Sure.
this, which is just page 37, real simple, the edits that are currently in green that end during daily operation. I think it should be plural operations, and we need a period,
Oh, okay,
not to be nitpicky.
okay. The other question, and this has come up at previous, discussions that we've had, is, whether or not creation and innovation is whether or not there should be a separate industrial category, or that industry should be called out, or if this is sufficient or something that you want to just leave to the city council to discuss. I mean, it does describe that there are industrial, industrial uses there, but I think, so the question is whether or not we need to recognize the presence of the industrial districts that we have.
I move for it to say creation and innovation in industrial areas.
Second.
And, or in, and,
It can be and.
or,
I said in, but if you,
Yeah, oh.
but
I would do in.
I think it's about industrial areas. So
Yeah, but
in
the
industrial.
question is, on the, future land use map, and in this, in this, these are just, this is describing the land use categories that will be represented on the land use map. So I'm not sure that that language really does.
It does
the
not, it does not, sorry. So in that case, we should just call it industrial area. I mean, it would be weird not to have a land use category for industrial areas.
Which page are we?
We are on page, it starts at the bottom of page 30, the title is on the bottom of page 37.
Okay, thank you.
And then the description of what it is on the top of page 38.
Thank you.
So, I mean, we can leave it as is. That's kind of what it's, staff, that's what's on the map now. Or we can suggest to the council that we believe that that ought to be. And we can change it in this, and then recommend that one of the things that the city council ought to consider is making it appropriate changes to the map later. I don't know that it necessarily means to be changed before this goes to council, but
I might suggest changing it from creation and innovation to creation and innovation and enterprise, because I think that we're going to find as time goes by that some of the things that are going to occur technologically are going to become business employment-centric areas that are not necessarily industrial, and they may not be creative, but they'll definitely be innovative and enterprise-oriented, and that may become part of our discussion when we revisit zoning to figure out how we want to make sure that the changes that may occur in zoning don't harm the tax revenue base of the city. And we want to make sure that we can be open-minded towards different kinds of businesses in these areas that may not have been there to start with. So I want to hope that we could have a wider lens for the industrial areas to be more encompassing of maybe some non-traditional industrial applications. So that's why I use the word enterprise.
that's language that I remember from past discussions, and I support that language. But I'll
Okay.
leave it to other thoughts.
I'd motion to change the header from creation and innovation to creation, innovation, and enterprise.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. Anything else in chapter 5? Okay, moving on to community systems, chapter 6. All right, I have some suggested language on page 42 of some additional text that I propose go after the first paragraph under introduction, and I will read that. Most of the infrastructure that allows Evanston to accommodate new growth and development is the responsibility of the city of Evanston. New buildings must be connected to the city's water and sewer infrastructure. However, there is also a broad range of city buildings that house many of the public services that residents rely on. These include our 5 fire stations, the library, police station, recreation and community centers, animal shelters, and the city's service center. These buildings are in varying states of maintenance. Some, like the animal shelter in Robert Crown, are new. Others, like the police headquarters buildings and the 2100 Ridge property, were built decades ago and no longer meet acceptable standards. Aging infrastructure and evolving needs form a unique problem set for Evanston. Our ability to continue meeting the needs of our community requires a robust system of city services supported by other service providers. The policies and action statements presented in this chapter highlight the opportunities for collaboration and the challenges of maintaining the public buildings and the challenges of maintaining public buildings and infrastructure well into the future.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, my next item is on page 44, under the waters and supply system. And just as a sentence that relates to the replacement of lead service lines. So I would just like to add the following sentence. The replacement of existing lead service lines has been mandated by the state of Illinois and will be an ongoing effort for years to come.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So Chair, here again, I'm toggling between two documents, and in the one document, there was a discussion, a tactic of ensure universal broadband across all neighborhood. Can you remind me what the yellow highlight means? Does that mean it's been removed? Because it's not presented in any form that I can see in the PDF.
Okay, in the PDF, there is a section
Section, yeah,
on broadband that's discussed on page 45.
right.
We did change the policy that's on page 48 and voted on to encourage internet access for the broader Evanston community based on prevailing technologies in order to close the digital divide.
I remember that, okay, so.
So
I'm
it's,
good.
you know,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on chapter 6? Okay, moving on to chapter 7, getting around. Okay. I have, obviously, a couple of suggestions. With respect, on page 50, there's the discussion of transit generally, and I would propose adding the following text to conclude that section. Among the issues with respect to transit is that none of the providers are under Evanston's control, and all are currently facing significant financial challenges. Until it is possible to provide effective regional solutions that allow residents to easily get to and from destinations using transit, and for those living in communities to our west to get to jobs in Evanston, transit will fail to meet its full potential as part of Evanston's multimodal transportation network. And this is just an acknowledgement, really, of kind of where things are. So how do people feel about whether or not that language is necessary? Commissioner Mangum.
Maybe just include the first sentence, but then as you go on, and when it gets to the part that transit will fail to meet its full potential, I hope that things will be better by the time this goes into effect. This is for 2045, so I would say just leave out the failure part of it, and, let's hope for the best.
Okay. Or we can leave it out altogether and not mention it, and we can do that too.
Thanks.
If that's your preference, that's fine.
Yeah, if we could just leave out the sentence regarding the transit will fail part.
Well, and then then maybe what we need to do is just, put that, add that sentence to the first paragraph under that section. And just, So it would read, Evanston's transit system includes a mix of bus and rail services connecting residents to local and regional destinations. And it describes the CTA and PACE operate 9 bus lines, including the Pulse Dempster line, which provides efficient service between downtown and O'Hare Airport. And then we could just add, among the issues with respect to transit is that none of the, or actually, maybe it would be better because we have a one-sentence paragraph, the one that starts transit usage is high. If we add just the, I don't, just as a personal thing, I don't really like one-sentence paragraphs if we can avoid them. Thoughts? I mean, it could be we could leave this out too. So it's a question of whether or not we want to just acknowledge that this isn't a topic that is totally within our control.
I would say just probably leave it out.
Okay. I'm fine. As I said, I have no particular, intent. Okay. On page 52, I do have a couple of things related to parking, however, that I would like considered. On page 52, I would propose, under the parking section, I would propose replacing the last sentence with the following language. So right now, the language says Evanston's development guidelines historically require a minimum number of off-street parking spaces to accommodate the growing needs of residents and businesses. And I would like to suggest the following. One of the ongoing discussion points is how much off-street parking should be required for new developments, or if any off-street parking should be required at all. This is especially true for residential developments, especially those in neighborhoods that developed before automobiles became the primary transportation mode for most households. On-street parking is already at a premium in many of these neighborhoods, and the prospect of new households raises concerns about the impact on current households, which I think, really kind of more closely reflects some of the discussions that we, the testimony we heard.
I'll second that.
Chair,
Question?
Yes, question. Where do you want to put this?
I want to put this under the parking section.
Yes.
In the second paragraph, right now, there's the sentence that says, Evanston's development guidelines historically require a minimum number of off-street parking spaces. It's on page 52.
Got it. You want to put it right before that or after it?
I want to delete the last sentence and replace it with the language I just read.
Would you please read that again?
Sure. The new language?
Yes.
The new language says,
I just want to hear it. That's fine. Thank you.
one of the ongoing discussion points is how much off-street parking should be required for new developments, or if any off-street parking should be required at all. This is especially true for residential developments, especially those proposed in neighborhoods that developed before automobiles became the primary transportation mode for most households. On-street parking is already at a premium in many of these neighborhoods, and the prospect of new households raises concerns about the impact on current households.
Okay, so I think that makes a lot of sense. That does kind of, though, compete with the argument that public transit adjacent in development is notably requiring, we've acknowledged that we can do less parking. So I'm wondering if there's a way to say exactly what you're saying, but make sure that it's not contradicting that notion.
I think,
I wonder if there's a way to modify that slightly.
I'm not sure what she said conflicts with that.
You don't?
No.
Well, it felt like there's an overwhelming understanding of the history of housing and whatnot being built that didn't require parking before, and we're suffering the consequences of that with all the, for example, the condo conversions of buildings that don't have parking but are now, have, two residences with two vehicles that are off-street or on-street parking. So,
Yeah, the intent is really just to recognize that this is kind of an ongoing issue and attention.
okay.
So I have yes.
I think, Darush makes a good point, but I think the first sentence, the end of the first sentence kind of gets at that, or if any off-street parking should be required at all. And that is something we're talking about. In some places, it could be appropriate.
Yeah.
No parking minimum.
Yeah,
And we've
that's-
kind of kicked around that idea before, so.
I agree.
The other thing is that transit-oriented development is typically done by major thoroughfares, and this makes a point of saying a lot of this is in smaller residential areas. So I think there's less conflict there too, right? Like,
Maybe.
yeah, you don't think so?
Parking lots are parking lots. There are parking, yes, let's just leave it. That's fine. I
And there is
100% agree.
And there is a push to maybe eliminate, some off-street parking and replace it with residential. I mean, that's an idea that's floating out there as well. Again, and on page 55, under parking,
Wait, have we voted on?
I'm sorry.
So I second.
I think actually Commissioner
It's
Puctow
been
did.
seconded. Okay, all right, sorry.
But, so I think we need to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Now, my next thing is under parking on page 55, which is, I think, the challenges section. Have to see where we are. Key challenges and opportunities is the kind of the section. And after the opening paragraph in that section, the one that starts, downtown Evanston has an extensive parking network. Despite that, challenges remain, and strategic actions are essential to ensure parking in Evanston is safe and convenient for everyone. And I propose the following additional language. Residential neighborhoods are served by a combination of on-street and off-street spaces. Additional data gathering and trends analysis relating to housing units and vehicle ownership in Evanston can help inform discussions about how best to right-size Evanston's parking requirements. Any?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then under the impact of minimum off-street parking requirements, I propose deleting the language that's there and replacing it with the following. And by the way, these are all kind of included in the handout I did, if it's easier to follow along, but I will, you don't have one. Do you have one? Oh, okay, good.
Can you read the language you want to replace
All right.
before the replacement language,
All right.
please?
The language I would like to replace reads as follows. Minimum off-street parking requirements force private developments to set aside space for parking that could be used for community, economic, or green spaces. These parking facilities often along main streets and retail areas disrupt the walking experience. And I would like to replace it with the following. Current parking requirements have been identified by some as an unnecessary barrier to new development. It is argued that the determination of how much on-site parking to provide should be left to developers. Others argue that there should be some guardrails in place to ensure that a reasonable amount of on-site parking is provided, especially in residential neighborhoods where finding parking can be challenging.
I think we should keep it the same as it,
Is in the current document?
yes.
Other thoughts?
I agree. I think we should keep it as it is.
Okay. All right. In that case, I will withdraw. All right. Anything else under transportation? The environment. And then I guess parks and recreation and open space. And then I guess then we're on to chapter 10, housing.
Chair, can we actually just take like a 5-10 minute break?
Yeah, we can.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, Joe, we'll reconvene at, how about 15 minutes, and we'll reconvene at 8:05?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are we ready to be back on? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us this break. I think we'll go back on the record, and we're ready to begin discussing the housing chapter. Questions? Anybody besides me? Okay, I would like to suggest under housing, in the opening paragraph, and I would put this as the very opening paragraph under introduction, and it would read as follows. Diversity is a hallmark of Evanston's housing stock. Maintaining both the diversity of types of housing available in Evanston and keeping them at price points that are within the means of all income groups is a key housing objective. Not everyone who would like to live in Evanston will be able to do so because the housing supply is not likely to ever catch up with demand. Still, it is important to explore ways to keep housing affordable at all income levels. This will help to keep vulnerable longtime residents in the community and provide opportunities for new households, especially those with children, to find a home in Evanston. That's my proposed language. Thoughts?
Second.
Are you proposing that replaces the introduction?
No, that it be the opening paragraph, and then we keep the introductory paragraph as the second paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the sentence about not everyone who would like to live in Evanston will be able to do so. Because my goal is that everyone who would like to live in Evanston would be able to do so, and I don't want to set ourselves up for saying that's not possible. So I wonder if we just
Take that out?
take that out.
Yep,
And say it is important to explore ways to keep housing affordable at all income levels.
Okay, I'm fine with deleting that sentence. So should I read this again I'll read it one more time. Diversity is a hallmark of Evanston's housing stock. Maintaining both the diversity of types of housing units available in Evanston and keeping them at price points that are within the means of all income groups is a key housing objective. Still, and then I guess we would just say, it is important to explore ways to keep housing affordable at all income levels. This will help keep vulnerable longtime residents in the community and provide opportunities for new households, especially those with children, to find a home in Evanston.
I second.
Can I kind of split the difference here and suggest that, let's see, we delete that sentence as you said, but keep a phrase of it, which I think is objectively true, and write it to say, maintaining both the diversity and types of housing units available and keeping them at price points that are within the means of all incomes is a key housing objective, period. Still, it is important to explore ways to keep housing affordable at all income levels, comma. However, housing supply is not likely to ever catch up with demand. This will help keep vulnerable long-term residents in the community and provide opportunities for new households, especially those with children, to find a home in Evanston.
I'm more comfortable with the previous suggestion. I don't think we know that to be true.
So here's the thing about affordable housing. We can say we want to make sure that everybody that wants to live here can live here. It's a noble calling, but in a practical sense, it probably will not actually happen. But in terms of having that as an objective, a tactic that we need to take on and try for, I think identifying it in this plan is important. I think you say this because you want to strive towards it. So to try to game out the real meaning of what the market's going to deliver, it moves, it comes and goes. You go back to 2009, there's a lot of people that couldn't keep their homes, that lost their homes, and there's a lot of people that were able to buy those homes not too far down the timeline because the prices had dropped so much. So the story is a changing story about what is affordable and what's not. So I think as a community, we should be striving towards advancing the affordable housing cause anywhere we can. And that's, I think, sufficient.
Yeah, agreed. This is a vision document, so it's appropriate to have aspirational language, and I wouldn't want to have language in there that is speculating about what is or isn't possible.
Okay. And I think that, and again, the point of this is we want diversity, so we want housing for all income levels. So I think that it's a long-standing community objective. It goes, policy, it goes back to the 1970s. It's been a policy to, support and maintain a diversity of Evanston's housing stock. So I think that that's, in terms of price point and type and unit types. So I'm happy with taking out the sentence that was suggested. And is there other? I appreciate your effort to maintain something related to the language, but I don't, I think that the part about diversity being a community objective is what's really kind of important to me. So we're taking out the sentence, so I will read, do I need to read it again, or we're good?
There's a motion on the table, which is
Right.
what you read with that
Sentence
with that
out.
sentence struck.
Right.
And it's been seconded.
Okay, and there's no second for the alternate language, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Is there anything else under housing?
So yeah, there's a couple things under policy statements I wanted to discuss and get the commission's feedback. It says that
Which page?
policy statements.
Page 77.
77. So it says implement a comprehensive housing strategy, which is, I don't even know if that's aspirational because it's kind of like doesn't really say anything. So, and I'm fine with like letting the future figure it out. But on the other hand, when we talk about the importance of affordable housing, I'm wondering if there is a way to have a specific policy statement that incorporates because when we talk about how this has been on the table since the 70s, I mean, I've been around this housing from a real estate standpoint for that long, from the 80s forward, and I can tell you that there's been a whole lot more housing built that's not affordable than it's built that is affordable. So the question is this something that we need to identify in the master plan, and then that becomes a task for housing to do, and not to go wander off too far, but like, maybe the housing would create a fund, create a land trust to be able to buy the land, do things that would actually create permanent affordable housing in the community that wouldn't solely rely on the private enterprise to do, because the private enterprise is going to do as little as it can because there's no incentive there. It's not a fault of their own. It's just people are in the business of earning, and that's how they earn. So if we're going to force in affordable housing in the private sector, and that's all we do, then we've really not really done very much, as demonstrated the last 40-plus years. So the question is, do we want to have a fresh look at that and at least throw it out there and say something along the lines of, implementing a comprehensive housing strategy with a XYZ focus on affordability. I think affordability needs to be mentioned as a policy statement. And I'm not sure how to say it, but I wanted to put that part out there for discussion. And then I have one more after that.
But this was really kind of something that was discussed on April 16th when we were doing the housing, so the policy on page 81, it starts implement a comprehensive housing strategy. And the first action is develop and implement a strategic housing plan to guide the city's housing investment. So I think that gets at kind of the programs that you might.
I don't feel that way.
But is policy statement number 1 correct? Because on the draft they sent out later this afternoon, it says that the text should read differently than it's reading there on page 77.
Oh, and I'm actually looking at the one that's one of the things they fixed.
Right. So it doesn't read increase housing supply and expand housing options. That's the one that reads preserve and increase diverse housing choices.
Do you mind someone on staff putting on the big screen what changed since Friday? We should probably have done this at the start of the meeting for every chapter, right? If
The
there were
policy
changes.
statements. So everything in light blue was something that was not included in the Friday version. And then we caught that Sunday evening and updated it Monday.
Okay, great. So anything in blue on here is new from what was released on Friday? No.
That's not how it reads in what we got this afternoon. It's crossed out in red and
Really?
says
Then,
that should preserve.
No, I think that's public comment.
no, I
It
don't know
says
what
this
that.
was voted on already on 4/16, and the text should read preserve and increase diverse housing choices.
Really? I don't know what that
Yeah, I
draft
haven't-
looks
I
like.
got-
That's not what I looked.
Attachment I got this afternoon.
I'm seeing
This is from this.
I think that was public, but I think the packet, I think that was public comment onto a draft.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, we don't need more than the 2 drafts we have floating around.
So, Chair, I'm not trying to rewrite policy.
No.
All I'm saying is I think that there should be we should be tipping our hat more towards affordability in the policy statement. That's all I'm.
So what specifically are you proposing?
Implement a comprehensive housing strategy that has a more, give me a second, let me think about that. Well, emphasizing affordability is an important thing to do, but the comprehensive nature of the housing strategy would not solely emphasize affordability. So I think that we need to figure out a way to design, word craft it so that we're not saying implement a comprehensive housing strategy for affordability, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to have a comprehensive housing strategy that addresses the housing needs from all income levels, as we've often mentioned, but I think that the affordability is a very specific it's a very specific thing that's there's a lot of action steps that go into that for success. And I think that if we identify the need to do it, we can let the steps take care of themselves later. You can't do that now.
What about, I mean, we have, under that policy, we have 2 other action statements. So first, there's develop and implement a strategic housing plan to guide the city's housing investments and initiatives. Then 2 is complete a housing needs assessment to determine the types and qualities of housing needed for Evanston's population. And number 3 is collect and analyze local housing data routinely to inform data-driven housing decisions.
Chair, where are you?
I am on page 81,
Okay.
the policies and action statements.
Oh, I see. We were under the introduction.
Oh. No, and the policies are in the introduction as well, but the action statements are,
They're spelled out more.
they're spelled out in more detail.
I mean, my sentiment here is that the underlying point is a good one, right? All the research shows that affordability challenges are creeping up the income spectrum across a range of incomes. That said, I think, as Brian mentioned earlier, we've agreed not to relitigate decisions we've already made. So I'm inclined not to change it at this time, but I think when it comes time, I mean, there is a separate document that's a housing strategy, and I think that's a conversation to make sure is part of that, right? Is assuring that affordability is preserved across a range of income brackets in our town.
Okay, I'll pull back on that basis. I want to, there's one other item that I thought of from a policy statement, which, again, might be already inferred with the existing 6 or 7 that are there. And I was going to ask to add, promote the increasing the supply of adaptive reuse in work-live housing, but I did notate that that might be covered with number 3, support alternative housing models. But I was wondering if what what the commission felt, if they felt that identifying that would be worthy of doing inside the policy statements. If not, it's cool, but I just wanted to bring that up too.
Which page?
It's the policy statements on page 74. There's 1 through 6 on here, and I think there's 1 through 7 on.
Oh, there are 7. We're missing,
I'm lost.
unless it got added. Hang on a sec.
I think on the PDF, it's on page 77.
Okay, there you go. It
Oh,
did get added.
Page 77?
On the PDF, it's on page 77.
Okay, yeah, thank you, yeah. So I was suggesting maybe we consider adding 8, which would be to, and one of the reasons I'm thinking about this is the adaptive reuse is something that is environmentally sound thinking for properties that are becoming functionally obsolete. Like we're seeing the church over there on Oak and Church, and then there's the one over here by it's getting late, over by the Y. What's that building? That's the
It's going to be condos.
no, they're rentals.
The Masonic
Temples,
Temple.
Yeah.
Masonic Temple,
Masonic
it's
Temple.
rental. So I think that there's an opportunity there to do more of these things in the city, and that, along with work-live, I mean, we've had a technological change that's made work-live happen upon us as virally and technologically, we're now there. So I'm thinking maybe that's going to become even more of a prevalent way of working and living as we continue down this journey. So the question is, do we need to incorporate that, or is it covered under support alternative housing models?
I think it's covered, both under the, in the interest of not creating an entirely new policy category, which then would also need to be flushed out with multiple bullet points to have it out. I think your concept is still covered under 5, promote healthy buildings and neighborhoods, and specifically H5.3, promote green building practices, such as green building certifications like LEED and others, which do address the sustainable benefits of adaptive reuse.
Okay. Yep.
It
That's
also
fair.
actually is listed in H 2.4, update live, work, and occupational use regulations to allow a wider range of businesses and services, and in H2-10, which is redevelop underused properties to increase the supply of housing. So I think we're covered.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else under?
Chair, can I bring up something else? Let's see. All right. We voted at our April meeting, let's see, on page 82, the first point, H2.1, and we voted for that specific language, preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices. And I propose that we mirror that language throughout the document. Like, for example, if you go to page 77, we have a policy statement number 2, increase housing supply and housing choices. So change that to say, preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices. Also, in that first paragraph under the introduction, change this chapter outlines the framework for increasing housing choice and supply, comma, change that to this chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices. There are a couple more. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Let's see, on page 77, there is, in the paragraph second from the bottom, although little vacant land is available, comma, this plan outlines a path towards increasing housing choice and supply. So change that to, this plan outlines a path toward preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices. And then on page 80, the subheading, there's a subheading that says increasing the housing supply. Change that subheading to preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices. And in that paragraph, there's a sentence that says, as high housing costs are driven by a shortage of available homes, comma, increasing the housing supply through new developments. Change that to, as high housing costs are driven by a shortage of available homes, comma, preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices, comma, less restrictive zoning and repurposing, et cetera, et cetera. And then in this chapter, finally on page 82, the subheading 2 dot increasing housing supply and housing choices, similarly change that to 2 dot preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices.
Okay. I've got a question for staff. I mean, I know we voted on H2-1. We did not, I can't remember if the policy statement was something that we had on our list to vote on in April. So I guess the real question is, should what's now in H2.1 really be the policy statement? Or are they two different things? I mean,
I don't see how you can preserve and increase as a policy statement at the same time. To me, that's opposing options. So I don't think it should become the policy statement as a whole or be changed throughout the document. That doesn't make sense to me as language.
Commissioner Berlin.
My sense is that we already voted on this to preserve and increase. I don't think we're revisiting decisions we've already made. I understand the point about consistency. Specifically under policy statements, I think the fact that they're separated is a non-issue, right? Bullet 2 is increase, bullet 3 is preserve. You certainly can collapse them. I mean, I guess for the sake of consistency, you can put the word preserve before the word increase. I think there are a couple places where it may not be practical in that. Like there's one section on increase the housing supply. Well, you could put it there too. If you just want to be consistent across the document, you know. But I think that language, preserve and increase, is what we voted in. So I'm not going to object to the suggestion to be consistent throughout so that it doesn't, yeah.
And I can give, I'm not going to do it right now, but I can give examples of preserving and increasing diverse housing, because it doesn't necessarily apply to the exact same housing. It could be something completely different. It could be, a storefront with apartments. That's housing. So the question is, do you preserve it, or do you take it down and make a strip center out of it? And then now you haven't preserved it. So there are ways where you can be looking at a decision, a business decision, development decision, where you say, no, we want to preserve that, and we're not going to do that. Over here, yes, we're going to be increasing it because we're taking it and making more of it. So you can do both things. They may not apply to the exact same parcel of land. So I would leave that there.
I mean, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Thanks. I mean, I don't disagree that there's some inherent tension between those two activities by any means, but I don't think that that's the question on the table. And I think if our job is to accurately capture what we're hearing and then give council something to respond to, I think we made the decision as a commission that what we are hearing is preserve and increase. And I think that we should see how council wants to respond to that, because that's what we voted as our representation of the work we've done.
Okay, the question then is, with respect to internal consistencies and other words being discussed in other things, could you go
and I guess
through?
my motion is that list of changes to make this chapter consistent with the language that we voted on and agreed to last time, to make those 6 changes to match, preserve, and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Can you go through
Oh, yeah,
and tell
yeah.
us which page they're on again?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be helpful.
So, page 77, it is in the very first sentence. So change the first sentence to, this chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices.
Okay, hang on a second. I'd like to, it provides a framework for,
Preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices, comma, and then starting with the word maintaining, keep the rest of the sentence as is. Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. The second one, also on page 77, it is policy statement number 2.
now that we shouldn't change. Because that, the policy, the policy statement stays the same. It's the action that we voted on,
He's suggesting
Okay.
to change both.
okay? At which point, we're back to the policy and the action statement are identical.
Okay, well, all right. Policy statement. Let me move on to the next one, Gene, and you can tell me this. The paragraph on that same page that starts with the word although.
Okay?
So change to, although little vacant land is available, this plan outlines a path toward preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices.
Not to be nitpicky here, but can we not add things like diverse? Like, can we just keep this super clean and just preserve, like?
But he's trying to take the language in 2.1 and place that everywhere it says increasing.
Well, we can have it say preserving and increasing housing, well, the housing choice and supply is already in there. Oh, I see, diverse.
Well, do you mind if I?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to note, we don't have a second yet. But also, I understand the argument about consistency, but I do think this is a big enough change late enough in the process that potentially is having unintended consequences at a higher level of the statements that what we've seen before, which makes me concerned to make such a big change. The compromise of 2.1 took a lot from last time.
Yeah.
So I think the language as is already capturing that compromise. So I'm concerned about unintended consequences of just a wholesale changing any mention of increase to the preserve and increase diverse choices.
And just from a writing standpoint, I would like the internal consistency. But on another point, I left our meeting on April 15th or whenever that was with the 5-2 vote to change that language. I left that meeting under the impression that this body had removed the push for increasing Evanston's population housing supply. That was my impression. That was a result of hashing out that language.
We only voted on a specific proposal that was in front of us.
I understand that, but we had a lengthy discussion about, it seems like it's been very divisive in this community about some people wanting a great deal of upzoning, increase in density, and then other portions of the community being very much in opposition to that and preservation of Evanston's current built environment. And that compromise was reflected in our language of preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices. And then I went through and read this draft of the plan, and I noticed that, there still remain many references to increasing housing supply that seem to be inconsistent with our conversation from that meeting and the vote, the resultant vote. But that's my suggestion. And my suggestion is just to make it internally consistent with what we had agreed upon.
I think that what I'd like to do is I think if you, and I agree with your suggestion in the first introductory paragraph. I think that makes sense. In this particular paragraph, in the next sentence, we talk about this plan also addresses preserving existing homes and preventing displacement. So I'm not sure that the preserve and increase is necessary in this particular instance.
Okay.
And again, this is not a policy statement. This is just kind of context language. So I'm not sure that it needs to happen there. But where else do you want to? What else do you want to? What were your other?
Okay, page 80. That the subheading above the paragraph, the chronic underbuilding and
Right.
underinvestment. Chair Linwall, is that changing that language? Is that something you'd be supportive of?
I'm sorry, can you say where again?
Right. So in the third paragraph, increase the housing supply is the heading title, and then increasing the housing supply.
Okay.
If I may, see, that's an example of, I think, going beyond the scope
Yeah.
of what we're talking about. Because that paragraph in particular is all about supply, right? It's not about preserving choices. So I like I said, I'm sympathetic with the idea of consistency, but I think the way of going about this by just looking for any word where it says increase and changing it with the extended one is going to have unintended consequences.
I would not, I don't think we need to change this one because
Okay.
we do have a policy that says increase the housing supply. And it can
Okay.
be done in a variety of ways.
And
So,
then
where else?
on page 82, well, the text the subheading text directly above preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices, to change that language, increase housing supply and housing choices, to preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices.
No, that's the one I just was saying they would be essentially identical. And I think the policy we've agreed, we didn't change. We did change 2.1. So I think the only place that I think it makes sense to make the change would be in that opening paragraph.
Okay, amended motion to change it in the very first sentence of the chapter that starts with, this chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices, maintaining existing housing stock, preventing displacement, and preserving the racial and economic diversity of Evanston.
I think what we're talking about, what I understand the chairman to be saying is before the word increasing, insert the word preserving and. Right?
Oh, that would be. No, but I think that I kind of like the language of increase. This is a place where I think we do want to preserve and increase Evanston diverse housing choices. So I'm okay with that as part of the list.
Right. I think the way I heard it was dropping and supply, which I'm not comfortable with. So if we want, my motion, based on everything we're hearing, is if, for the sake of consistency, we want to change the opening sentence under the introduction on page 77, then for the sake of consistency, I think we could say this chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing housing choice and supply, comma, maintaining existing housing stock, et cetera, et cetera.
No, we voted on an action statement, and the question is making sure that this is consistent with that action statement. And I think that we can, and again, this is our deliberations, and it's our decision what the language will be.
And
I mean, I don't do you feel like that doesn't capture what you're going for? It sounds like what I hear you saying is you're concerned that we're saying increase more than we're saying preserve. And so it sounds like the chair has identified a place where we could better frame it to account for that.
yeah, and I would still favor modifying that first sentence to use that exact language, preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices, to replace the words increasing housing choice and supply.
My conversation is we didn't discuss the question of supply. Like that would be a
Right.
change that I'm not comfortable making and I'm also not comfortable making on the fly. So personally, I don't understand our decision to have conflict with that. Hand to my heart. I don't think that we discussed the phrasing in the last time, increasing housing choice and supply, in any way that would indicate we need to change it.
Yeah, because 2.1 doesn't address supply.
Yeah, this is not new language from the last draft.
Okay, we've got a motion. We need a second. Does anyone want to second? I think, go ahead.
I was just going to request clarity on what the motion is.
The motion was to change the first sentence of the chapter to, this chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing Evanston's diverse housing choices, comma, maintaining existing housing stock, comma, preventing displacement, comma, and preserving the racial and economic diversity of Evanston.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I'm looking at this and it says maintain existing housing stock.
Well,
So that's already kind of addressed in some ways, and I don't think there's a need to change this. I mean, I'm sorry, but I think we're okay.
without a second.
Yeah, if without a second, it fails. Or I
Can I-
could second it and
Can I
we
make
could vote.
a second motion? Then the second, a separate motion, this chapter change that first sentence to, this chapter outlines a framework for preserving and increasing housing choice and supply, maintaining existing housing stock, preventing displacement, and preserving the racial and economic diversity of Evanston. So that's Lauren's language. I'll propose that instead.
I will second that for the purposes of a vote, but I think in this case, we need a roll call vote.
Could you please state the sentence one more time?
Sure. This chapter outlines the framework for preserving and increasing housing choice and supply, maintaining existing housing stock, preventing displacement, and preserving the racial and economic diversity of Evanston.
All right, so discussion. That proposal, which has been seconded, expands the scope in a meaningful way that is beyond what we did in 2.1, because now you're applying the adjective of preserve to supply, which is not what 2.1 did, and that's not what we voted on. So just as a matter of even attempting something like that at this stage, I would encourage my colleagues to vote no.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, with that, could you take the roll call vote on this one?
Commissioner Aravalo,
Yes.
Commissioner Berlin,
No.
Commissioner Harris Ferry,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mabadi,
Yes.
Commissioner Mangum,
No.
Commissioner Puctel,
No.
and Chair Lindwall.
No. Okay, so with a vote of 6 noes and 3 yeses and 6 noes, is that, did I get it right?
5 and 3.
No, it's
5 to 3? That's right, 5 to 3. The motion fails, so the language stays the same. Anything else on the housing chapter? I have, while we're on housing, I'm going to suggest, one of the things that I would like to see, and I will be suggesting as a, I guess, a condition, is that a table, two tables comparing Evanston with our neighbors in terms of the housing cost burden for overall owners and renters be prepared and included in the document.
Which page?
It's not. It would be it's in my suggestions. I just wanted to raise it for now, so that using the ACS, American Community Survey data, just because I think it would be useful to have in our appendix. And it would be an appendix item. And obviously, we don't have the data, but I think it would be very helpful to include in the final plan document. So thoughts on whether or not that's helpful or not? I mean, this is something that staff would have to prepare. It's not already done. And again, I don't think it necessarily needs to be, and actually, I think this would be a recommendation for something that the city council should include in the final document. And I don't know that it necessarily has to be in the draft before it goes to the city council. So that's my suggestion. So I don't know what people think about that in terms of an action item.
Can you repeat the data you'd want? You said rent growth?
Okay. The data would be like in the appendix, there are the data tables that compare Evanston with our neighboring communities, and in terms of housing cost burden. So I would want the overall, and then I would want a table that addresses owners and one that addresses renters.
Personally, I think that's great. I think getting also some data on home price appreciation, right? And then rent growth, so how quick, like, it might be nice to see it over a period of time if more people are getting, if the rate at which housing is getting more expensive for people is quickening in the past few years, as it seems to be, then that would be great to know that, right?
And I think that, again, that's something that may be more appropriate to include in the housing strategy as that's developed, rather than, my thought is that this would be very helpful background information that could be used in future plan updates, and so that we can see over time, in terms of how we're doing with the plan implementation. So I'm just looking at this as baseline information.
Oh, for a
rather than
point in time?
Just a point of
Sure,
time.
yeah, and I also agree with you, though, that it doesn't need to preclude moving the plan to council, that it could be something we ask for on a parallel path.
And this would be updated as they review the comprehensive plan or stay as current, like 2025 data?
I think that the notion would be, right now in the appendix on the data, it's a point in time. I think it's 2023 data, actually. And so my suggestion would be that it be the point in time for 2023 as well for this, so that when the plan is updated 5 years from now, that the table, the same data tables could be produced so that we could see how we're doing over time. That's my suggestion. And I'd like to make that as a motion for something that we'll include in our recommendation when we'll get there, if people think it's a good idea. So.
I second.
Okay, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That's, I think, all I had for housing. So I think now we are ready to move ahead to Chapter 11, Health and Well-Being. And I have a suggested chapter edit that I would propose or section that I would propose be inserted on page 87, or at least after the climate discussion, which I think now in the current draft extends over to page 88. But after that section that describes climate, I would like to include a section describing our industrial legacy, just for context, and it would read as follows. Evanston no longer has many industrial uses. Old industrial sites have been capped with asphalt to allow for retail centers to be built. Sites that once housed gas stations or dry cleaners are other examples of contaminated sites that have limited potential for reuse without significant soil remediation. The waste transfer station in the Fifth Ward is another example of a facility that has affected the quality of life for residents who live nearby. And again, this is just really intended to set the context for some of the policies that we did vote on later that related to mitigating brownfields.
Second.
Gene, where were you going to put that?
On the kind of the bottom of page, on page 87, there's a discussion of climate. And I would put it just right, that section right after that. That's where I would propose, unless
That's great.
staff wants to put it before. I don't really care where it goes. Just interested in the language. All right, so any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 None opposed, I don't think. Okay. Then moving along to Chapter 12, Economic Development. Anybody have any suggested changes or I have a couple of comments. Or a question, actually, they're questions for staff. On page 92, there's a discussion under age that talks about we've got an older population, and, you know, and so there's concern about somehow the aging population is going to somehow, you know, we're not going to have enough workers in Evanston to support Evanston jobs. I don't understand that, so I would like an explanation of how that, what that text is intended to describe with respect to Evanston.
Sure. So as folks age, they tend to retire,
Right.
and with that, they are no longer working.
Right.
And so they need younger folks to move into those positions.
Yeah?
If they're unable to do so, then we will not have enough young folks in town to replenish the workforce.
But Evanston is a regional, we're in a regional economic, you know, employment base, so I'm just trying to figure out whether or not this really has any applicability to Evanston, really.
I think the applicability would be they would no longer be living in Evanston, and we'd be drawing infill, commuter workers into the community. Again, if it's something the commission does not agree with, you're more than welcome to make a motion to strike that sentence.
Well, it's the really kind of how the whole section is written, and elsewhere in this plan, there's a notation that only 12% of Evanston's workforce lives in Evanston. So I'm just, and I don't have language because, it's a really kind of a question that whether or not, this makes sense. I mean, I don't think it doesn't need to hold up going to council, but there's just, I think it's,
defer to you and your commissioners if you want to make a motion to strike that particular sentence.
it would almost be a matter of striking that whole section.
I would say if the statements are true, they should remain. And if it's not, then we can remove it.
But I guess probably the problem I have is with the, like this shift indicate on the second paragraph, or that this shift indicates that the city is moving toward a future characterized by a shrinking pool of young people and an increasing number of older individuals, potentially harming local economic development. And I have no basis to think that that statement is true. I mean, it's certainly true that older adults are less likely to work, but again, because we're in a regional economy, I don't see how how the region is not going to be able to replenish Evanston's workforce.
I think, Chair, the data point that leads into that paragraph is what is leading to that second conversation, the 5% decline since 2010. So that is a fact. It's cited there. But again, it's at the discretion of the commission if they'd like to make a motion and strike it.
Go ahead.
I mean,
Commissioner Johnson?
I share your I share your overall concern about this section and others in this plan describing Evanston as an isolated town, not one suburb of nearly 200 municipalities within a metropolitan area of almost 10 million people. As far as, it's very late in the game to make substantive changes to address that. I mean, for this particular paragraph, I could suggest alternate language like, all right.
Actually, how about if we, on that second paragraph, if we delete the last two sentences, the one that starts with "this shift indicates," so we I'm fine with keeping the, working age adults make up about 67% of our population, and that it's declined. So I would be fine with
Yeah.
deleting, it's kind of the conclusions that are troubling to me, not the data.
Right, yeah. Okay, so you want me to make a motion? Is yours a
have a
formal
couple
motion,
thoughts.
or?
No, well, and then in the next paragraph, again, the sentence that says an increasing age dependency ratio could indicate that the working population might have a greater tax burden to support the dependent population, thereby increasing their costs of living in the city. I think I'd like to delete that sentence as well.
So let's go back to the second paragraph. One of the great things that's happening in the city of Evanston is we're seeing an increasing effort or desire for people to age in place. So with that, you're going to see a population that's going to slowly get older as time goes by, if that trend were to continue. And as people get older, they move from being producers to consumers. I mean, that's just what happens. People stop working, they retire, and then they become more consumers than producers. So rather than fight that reality and be, disturbed by it, maybe we should be, this is a plan. Maybe we should speak to that and say, the city should be aware that as the community ages, that it is important for us to take necessary economic development steps to attract younger people to come to the community, to provide the necessary workforce that will be viable to maintain our economic growth. Something like that would speak to this issue without it sound like if we don't do something, we're doomed. Because this is kind of like, this doesn't really tell us what we should do. It just says bad stuff's about to happen. And that doesn't really say anything. That's why people, like Chair wants to take it out, like I would take it out, but maybe I put something else in there, though.
Well, I would propose taking out the last two sentences. So, I keep the working age residents, represent 67% of the population. I probably would add that to the paragraph above. And then I would, it's the conclusions in this section that
So-
bother me.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Why don't we keep the factual statements and we just remove the speculative ones? So that would be striking the last two sentences in the second paragraph and the last sentence in the third paragraph.
I would second that. Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then, I guess the other clarification question I've got for staff is on the next page under the educational attainment. I'm on the second paragraph, I'm just wondering, how, or can you provide a discussion that says, given higher wage occupations tend to be in education and healthcare and require higher education, the data suggests income and wealth inequality by race could worsen in Evanston, threatening the community's cohesion and economic vitality unless addressed through specific policies. I'm just trying to understand that, what that is. Is there data that really suggests that? Or, and again, this is something that, it's just a question.
I think this especially speaks to when higher education becomes unattainable for younger folks, and it is a popular option to be employed in Evanston in institutions that are of education or medical nature. If you're unable to attain that education, you cannot obtain those higher paying jobs in Evanston.
Yeah, but is that because, it's the income and wealth equality could, by race could worsen. So what information, I'm just, it just, I'm just trying to, I'm struggling with the sentence. I mean, it's not something I'm gonna, if it needs to stay, it can stay, but I'm just,
I think
don't
this
have-
also, I think this also speaks to the point that it is typically folks in underserved communities that are unable to attain higher education, thus equating to an inability to get higher wage jobs.
So I believe what's said here is correct.
okay.
So my question to you, though, I think what Jean's asking for is, says the data suggests. So can you just enlighten us as to where this data came from? Because I personally believe it, but like I don't have any data that I can say, well, this is why. I just generally believe it. So can you share with us where that data, how that data was derived?
The census. Yeah, ACS 2023.
So it's the data given in the paragraph above, in footnote 56.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Well, I'm not gonna, it's late, I'm not gonna belabor the point, but that's just a question I had about, again, there are places in here where there are conclusions where there's not a lot of discussion as to how or why. So let's move on. Anything else in economic development? Okay. And moving along to Chapter 13, Arts and Culture and Community Building. Does anyone have anything in that chapter? 13. Okay, hearing none. Chapter 14, Preservation. And again, I will note that the latest version does include 1975 for the first preservation ordinance. Thank you very much. They're celebrating their 50th year. I have nothing. Does anyone else have?
Yeah, I just had a question about, under policy statements, page 104, policy statement number 1 talks about safeguard the integrity of city's landmarks, historic districts, and built resources eligible for designation. I just have a question about the eligible for designation part, and if they're eligible for designation but not yet designated as historic, is there something, I guess, something being
Proposed?
protected before it's under that guideline? Does that make sense?
Yes, and if you look on page 108, it's explained, and in the text explained a little bit more, because there are instances where there are properties in a historic district, like there's a difference in protection level between something that's in a local historic district and something that's in a national register district.
Sure.
And so if you have examples of a landmark that's in a local or a national register historic district, and the neighbor next door proposes to make changes that really kind of impact the integrity of the landmark house, there's, that what's being suggested is you ought to look for ways to do an advisory review or some other kind of, something to help protect the integrity of that kind of the streetscape, the built environment. So, and this is language that kind of came out of from the Preservation Commission. And I think where is it discussed?
So
I
if they're
think-
eligible for landmark designation, why are they not
Not-
then designated?
In part, in some cases, the owner hasn't requested it.
Right.
In some cases, there are, there's an age, like with National Register of Properties, to be nominated, it ought to be 50 years old, for example.
Right.
And there are, properties that are in historic districts are a little bit different, because in a historic district, the property is either, contributing or non-contributing is kind of house. So you can have a landmark house that's been designated and a contributing structure next door that contributes to the overall, integrity of the district. So it's, kind of almost it's a technical sort of thing, but it's something that has been discussed as an issue that came up in our, January hearings, I think, where it was discussed. And so anyway, this kind of comes out of the Preservation Commission.
It's sort of like how every homeowner is eligible to apply for a property tax appeal, but not everyone does. Even if they want to, they don't get it together to do it, so I think.
Okay, anything else on preservation? Final chapter, oh, actually, we have a little bit more, but implementation. Anything on implementation? Okay. Then the last piece we have in this packet is the glossary, which is new. And I had two questions, and I guess they're kind of, I'd like to get input from staff. We have in the list, there's a conditional use permit, and there is a special use permit. And the language is almost identical, and we've typically used special use permit in Evanston. So the question is whether or not we should leave conditional use permit in or just delete it.
It's more to inform that the glossary is here, so I think it's to provide information for those who are curious about what either are.
Okay, I can leave it. It just seems to me that since we don't use conditional use, it might be best to delete it. And so I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 And then similarly, we have a definition for a planning commission, and we are a land use commission. So I would propose that we change this to land use commission. So that's my motion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that's. Does anyone have anything else they would like to bring up? If so, I do have one other thing that I noticed that we have not discussed. And that is on page 41, policy 9, which, where was it? Oh, no, it's actually, it's on page 41. It's 9.5, which appears to have come from the Environment Board. And this, I don't think, was something that we saw, or I guess we routinely just sort of said include all of the Environment Board's suggestions. But I think that this is one where we ought to just have a discussion, which says, allow pockets of retail areas in every neighborhood to ensure all residents have essential services within walking distance. And I guess my questions are, what's a neighborhood? And are we proposing, does this imply that we're going to suddenly, allow retail uses in the middle of existing residential neighborhoods where they haven't historically been?
Yeah, that one, I mean, I like the intent of it. It does seem, though, to be worded in a way to be much more significant than maybe it looks on the surface. So maybe we just soften it by, instead of saying allow, which is a fairly direct direction, encourage, consider, tolerate.
Well, and the problem I've got with this is we don't know how to define neighborhood. Right now, we've defined it by ward. We don't know if we're talking about, commercial or corridor streets. We don't know.
Yeah.
This one, it may be a matter of, encourage essential, encourage the provision of essential services that are within walking distance of all neighborhoods. But, I mean, we've got some where they're just, I mean, you go up to the northern border of, North Evanston, and there's not retail anywhere. I mean, you got it on Central Street, but you get up by Isabella and there's.
Chair, one option would be to analyze the ability to allow or explore opportunities to allow. It's an action step that the city could take and obviously bring back for further consideration in future conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want it in here because it implies that this is what the zoning policy will be, and I'm not sure that we're anywhere near there yet.
Yeah.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
That because I share your concern about there's no definition of a neighborhood, so that we just take out this sentence, replace the whole thing with allow pockets of retail areas in every ward, period.
That would be fine.
But I think the walking distance is the
Yeah.
important part, since it's from the environment folks, that it's walkable. So adding
Right.
something about
Okay.
walkable.
But it also is under a policy that says promote development of diverse housing types in all neighborhoods. So it also doesn't really
Fit.
fit.
Then I would change allow to promote then. I wouldn't allow, because I think that's a bigger conversation. And, I mean, I don't even know if it's a reasonable expectation in some situations. So I think we have to, and also, like, I think about what's already there in Evanston. We have a lot of
A lot of it's
areas
here.
where there's little pockets of retail and residential, and there is some vacancy there.
How-
So it's not like.
how about
there's
if we
a-
say support?
There's a hunger for this.
I mean, the other thing is that I think as we learned during COVID, not everybody there's no universal definition of what is an essential service. So this caught my ear as well as something that was strangely, didn't feel familiar. I think we could maybe compromise on something that is vaguer to give us some flexibility to revisit. Your point is a good one. It's in a weird place, but putting, in terms of the section being about housing types, putting that aside for a second, maybe it's explore opportunities to facilitate retail in every neighborhood, like retail in every neighborhood, so that residents can walk to services.
Does it have to be in every neighborhood to be walkable?
They're suggesting, we could also, I think it's within our purview to vote to just drop this as well.
Yeah, because it's.
Yeah.
It's not right.
This ultimately will be decided by just the zoning definitions, right? And on a case-by-case basis, would we be looking at situations where someone wants to try to get a special use to put retail in?
Yeah, and it seems like this is not the place, we've agreed that this evening's meeting, it seems like is not the place for substantive changes where we feel like either it's totally new text or whatever, so.
This is something that we didn't see on the 16th.
Yeah, it seems like it feels unfamiliar to a lot of us,
I
so.
believe we saw it on the 16th.
I would like to move to strike NP 9.5.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I
Well,
don't,
as long as we're doing very small things, and I'm sorry, my fellow commissioners, please don't kill me. I know it's late. We've been here a long time. The one thing I'll just point out, because it was in my notes, and I just feel obligated to follow my notes, is that on page 14, I just want to flag if this is written the way we intended it to be written. The very first bullet at the top of the page, enhance public spaces and activities, provide more parks in underserved areas and outdoor spaces, and host more street activities. The way this is written, where the phrase in underserved areas has been inserted, it implies the only place the parks would go is underserved areas, and the outdoor spaces and street activities would happen anywhere. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but if people want all of those things to happen in underserved areas, we should move the phrasing to the end of the sentence so that it comes after activities.
I think the outdoor spaces and the street activities should happen everywhere. So I think the parks, we want in underserved areas.
Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Changes?
Ready for a grand motion?
I think at this point, we are ready for a motion. And just to clarify, what our motion can be is to recommend approval, we can recommend denial, we can add additional things that we think that the council ought to consider adding. And then on the list that I had put together for all of you, at the very end of it, I'd had, identifying topics where city council input would be helpful. And I guess we can discuss that after the motion, or we can talk about it a little bit before, because basically this is going to go to the city council, and they're, the ball will be in their court. And particularly, I think that one of the items that, I'll just kind of go through the list. So we've discussed the future land use map designation and suggested that innovation and creation be expanded in the definition. We've had a little bit of discussion about the campus community and neighborhood interface, how that balance between residents and institutions should be handled. I would like to really encourage the council to focus a little bit on the community systems policies and actions to make sure that they're good with the capital improvement and city building language that's in there that we voted on. In the housing, we've talked about, the balance between the housing supply and demand. But most importantly, I think that our recommendation should include something about, identifying what staff resources should be allocated to produce a full and complete comprehensive plan document that includes all of the maps and the other, the tables and some of the other materials, and how that should be handled going forward. And again, I think that the council should be encouraged to really address how the final document, after they've provided their input, can be reviewed by the community, so that at the end of the day, what's being adopted is a comprehensive plan document that reflects our community, what we want to see in the future, and recommending that we, recognizing that we have a whole host of diverse opinions and actions, and that this plan is intended to be updated every 5 years. So I think that we should, in the motion, I think, go ahead and make your grand motion. I think we're pretty much.
Do you mind if I
Yes.
make the motion on the
Yes.
comp plan first, and then we do
That's fine.
those separately?
Yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
In that case, I move that we recommend approval of the revised, of the comp plan as shown in the revised packet posted, as is, inclusive of all of the text changes that we discussed and approved this evening.
I second.
Okay, I think on this, we should have a first discussion. Is everybody good? All right, on this, I believe we should have a roll call vote. So, Ms. Jones, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo,
Yes.
Commissioner Berlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris-Perry,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Mabadi,
Yes.
Commissioner Mangum,
Yes.
Commissioner Pucktall,
Yes.
and Chair Linwall.
Yes. Okay, with 8 in favor and 1 against, the motion to,
7 to 1.
oh, 7 to 1.
7 to
Oh,
1.
that's right, I'm sorry. 7 to 1. All right, now, and that includes what we did not discuss, well, I think that will be fine. What we did not discuss, and I think at this point, we've made the motion and we've gone forward. We have discussed adding the proposed data tables with respect to bedroom mix and the housing cost burden. The maps, the only one that really, well, I think we've discussed the maps. We know that the parks map needs to be created at some point. And the historic district map needs to be corrected. And I think those are on staff's agenda, and we don't need to vote on anything there. But I think that in forwarding the recommendation, I think what we, should probably discuss is if there are areas where we think that the council ought to particularly focus their attention, that would be appropriate. And in particular, I think that our recommendation ought to go with a recommendation that sufficient staff resources be allocated so that we can produce a full and complete comprehensive plan based on, that includes our recommendations. Any discussion? Because otherwise, this just kind of goes.
I have a question. When you say that to comment for the council to give them some direction on this, are you asking us to give some direction on where we think council should critique the plan? Or are we giving them direction on what we think would be ideal next steps for implementing the plan?
It's, I think, really to kind of focus their discussion on critiquing the plan, particularly, for example, on the industrial, whether or not we need an industrial district, or, that would be some point of discussion, or we can just send it, saying this is our best effort, these are the things we believe are should be included. I personally would like to see them spend some time focusing on the community systems policies and actions, because that's something that, really was an addition that we suggested, and, a lot of the language that we included really were, things that commissioners recommended. And, I think that that's an area that it would be helpful if they kind of spent some time discussing to make sure that they're in agreement that that's the, the way they want to go, that's the direction.
So when the council has that discussion, then what's the mechanics here? Do they have a discussion and then do they send it back to us? Or do they have a discussion and make their own assessment?
We
of
don't
it?
know. We're going to vote, and at the end of this meeting, we're going to close the public hearing.
Yeah.
And then the council has the prerogative of making changes based on our draft.
I see, okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to come back to us. Could, but it doesn't have to.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have something they think the council ought to focus on? Or should we just recommend, these are our suggestions? recommendations?
I think personally, given that we've voted it and said it's going to them, maybe we just, I mean, it's ultimately their call, so maybe we just let them do their thing.
All right. Any other thoughts? All right. I guess with that, I will close the public hearing on the comprehensive plan, and we will move into what? Yes, that's just what I was going to do. So the public hearing on the comprehensive plan is now officially closed. The next item on our agenda are communications. Do we have any communications from anyone?
A very brief one, basically just in relation to the training that happened last week. We heard from the trainers again, who again expressed their appreciation for the discussion, and they did summarize the evaluation that you guys filled out at the end of that, so I can send that to you so you can have it.
Okay. Great. And with that, the next item is public comment. And what do I start with? The online first, I guess? I have, first up is Michelle Kleibeck. And given that it's already 9:30, I hope you can keep your comments limited. Is Michelle still here? I don't see her. How about Carla Sutton? Carlos.
Carlos Sutton, resident 5th Ward, Evanston, for 70 years. I stand here this evening in opposition for this committee to forward this Envision Evanston 24D5 proposal to the City Council. It should have died here tonight. But since it didn't, I find this plan offensive to marginalized people in my community. There's obvious omissions to this proposal that have not been considered, and I'll just go through those briefly. Some of the omissions are: 1, it does not mention or to encourage or to consider any application of a land trust where it should be. 2, it seems to have omitted any proposal to address elderly housing for people like me who need assistance to stay in place. It appears to favor developers' conception of higher density and more skyscrapers. It doesn't even mention Gilbert Park on your report, my park on Emerson Street. And for your information, the transfer station is not in the 5th Ward, it's in the 2nd Ward. It does not address the concerns of elderly people who also are looking for support as small landlords to keep their properties. There's insufficient participation. In a city of 70,000 people, it is the apathy of less than 7,000 people have had any kind of input on this program. These proposals are gentrification on steroids. Until the time comes today that the Land Use Commission addresses my concerns, I can't approve it and wish that it does not go any further, but I will also speak against it at City Council. Thank you.
Next speaker is Tricia Conley. Is Tricia here? No, I don't see her. John Story Williams.
Williamson.
Williamson. Oh, it didn't, only has Williams on my sheet. Sorry, I apologize.
I want to speak tonight about the broader political dynamics that have shaped this process, particularly the advocacy coming from Mayor Daniel Biss and his administration in support of sweeping zoning changes, including the elimination of single-family zoning. These proposals, while framed as progressive, risk undermining the stability and character of many Evanston neighborhoods. especially in the absence of solid data or community consensus. Meanwhile, organizations like Connections for the Homeless, whose core mission is to serve unhoused individuals, have had privileged access to the planning process. They've now gone far beyond their original scope and are actively organizing their staff and supporters to push for blanket upzoning. Their influence has been amplified by city leadership, while many longtime residents have felt sidelined or even silenced. As this plan moves to City Council, I sincerely hope it is not simply adopted as a political win for a few powerful interests, but instead is revised to reflect the values and aspirations of the people who live here, invest here, and care deeply about Evanston's future.
Thank you. The next speaker is Meg Welsh. Is Meg here? Okay. Next on my list, I have Liz Bryant.
Hello, everybody. My name is Liz Bryant. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself. I'm often in the wings here,
Right.
and I am a member of the League of Women Voters. I just got voted on the board, and I'm also an observer. So I come in here, and I just wanted to sit there and say this is why I'm in the audience, and I also want to sit there and say thank you very much for all your work. I have respect for everybody's opinions and everybody's work, and thank you for everything that you do.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Paul Breslin.
Paul Breslin, 1635 Hinman. I want to kind of take a look at the larger picture here. I'm unhappy with how we got here. I'm unhappy with the lack of transparency that was observed in drafting this plan, with the mysterious shift in direction from almost making Tekla Associates the consultant and going with HDR. I'm concerned that the zoning analysis is actually the basis of most of this document, even though they were not formally supposed to be involved in this process. I'm unhappy with the fact that the mayor tried to turn this into a moral issue where if you had any problems with the plan, you must be a selfish person who doesn't want affordable housing. That couldn't be further from the truth. I will also say that I can't see myself as a NIMBY because I don't think my immediate neighborhood will be affected by this. I live in a 3-story condo building with 18 units. There's not a single family house on my block. It's apartments. It's a little hotel. So I am not personally threatened by this, but my sense of what the city is threatened by this. And I think we've been manipulated and rushed and set against each other. I take very seriously the criticisms of this plan offered by Alf McConnell, who has been designing affordable housing for 30 years and says that upzoning the residential areas to permit 2 to 4 flats will result in gentrification because they cannot be made affordable by any conceivable financing scheme. You can't hire a professional building manager if you have that few units. And what will happen is the developers will go where the land is cheapest and the existing property is cheapest, like in the 5th Ward, and they'll knock stuff down and they'll put up these things that are twice as expensive, and people will be priced out of that neighborhood. The black neighborhoods in Evanston may be financially stressed, but they are coherent neighborhoods of long standing. And I've heard people like Carla Sutton and William Carter and a number of other people, Malika Gardner, saying this is neighborhood busting. And I take that very seriously. I don't claim to speak for black people, but I listen when black people speak. And what I'm hearing is different from what I'm hearing from white people who say, oh, I'm so concerned about these poor underserved people. Underserved people are not a giant amoeba. They're individual people with individual opinions and individual experiences. And I listen to them. And I hear something very different from what I'm hearing from the enthusiasts of this plan. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker is Priscilla Giles.
I'm Priscilla Giles from the 5th Ward. I'm here to remind the powers that be that there are still people needing low-cost housing in Evanston. Jackson and Emerson and the dead end of Wesley blatantly stand out as places poor people were displaced by the city and largely still looking for housing they can afford. These are not the only people displaced from Evanston. Many longtime residents have been helped to find housing outside their community, families, and now live in places like Gurnee, Des Plaines, Skokie, Chicago, and other places away from Evanston. Although there are a few people who have really helped people to stay, the majority of the people who have helped them out of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Bella Philstrup. Bella Philstrup. Okay, she left. Sue Lowellbach.
Hello, I'm Sue Lowellbach from Connections for the Homeless. I want to thank you all. This was I think, a really, really difficult task that you just went through. And I am actually pretty amazed that you were able to come up with a plan that sort of tries to take very, very polarized views and make some sense of them into something. There are certainly things I would like to have seen different. I was pleased that I think the emphasis on affordability is starting to come through a little bit more clearly. And I know there's other people who feel that there are, other things that did not work. But overall, I feel like the set of recommendations in the plan is pretty solid, and I commend you for getting through this. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Scott Roberts. Scott, here? Okay.
Hello, Scott Roberts, 3rd Ward. Welcome, Pastor Luke. I also want to thank you for all the work you've done, like all the hours, not just here where we are, but also outside of this, doing all the research. And I think that it's great that we have this result. I'm just here to talk about some recent articles that have been published in local press about duplexes and the developments of it. In Evanston Now, article, "Duplex is good or bad for Evanston?" Spoiler, they're good. And part of the quote was from Council Member Pearl Davis. The duplex concept, she said, isn't all that different from the accessory dwelling units that are already allowed across the city. And she said she's heard from a lot of residents who want an in-law suite or second dwelling unit so aging family members can stay with them. In addition, she suggested that many parents with adult children would like for their offspring to be able to come back to Evanston and live on the same plot of land as the parents as a way to deal with the high cost of housing. I'm up for feedback on the idea, Davis said, but I think it's a good compromise, which is what many of us are saying. In the article in the Evanston Roundtable, City Council appears ready to support 2 flats, still divided on 4 flats. Quote is, "The majority of council members appeared to be open to allowing 2 units to a property, including many of those who are opposed to 4. Matt Rogers, who most of you know as former chair, quoted as having no hesitation in supporting the idea. This modest proposal would give property owners the ability to make small changes to their properties, but isn't as attractive to developers, he wrote. Currently, most single-family districts can already have an accessory dwelling, such as a coach house, in-law apartment, or granny flat. Allowing for 2 flats or duplexes only allows the 2 units currently permitted to be of equal size and both over 1,000 square feet if the lot allows. Sean Isles, my rep, declared himself a fan of duplexes and 2 flats and said that he has a yes to duplexes sign in his yard, which is available to everybody, every citizen of Evanston. I'm in favor of anything that happens in the existing envelope of the building, he said. If I walk to Walgreens, I probably pass 8 to 10 2 flats. There are excellent grandfathered examples of duplexes in the 3rd Ward that are part of our neighborhood already. I don't think it's a change that should scare anybody. There are definitely people who live in duplexes who are like, I wouldn't have been able to afford a single-family home like myself. Having basement suites, having ADUs, having attic apartments, garden apartments, these are ways to make entering the housing market easier for people. Tom Suffredin said he believes that 2 flats and duplexes would face less opposition in his ward as well, in part because many of them already exist. You can construct the same structure density, whether it's 2 dwelling units or 1, he says. The argument that this would be a gigantic shift is less persuasive. So as we transfer from this process to the zoning in the fall, I hope we keep this in mind and say yes to duplexes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Andrea Liss. Andrea, she left, okay. But I see that Michelle Kleibeck has joined us. I can call you now or later, but you're here.
I'm sorry, I'll just wait.
No, go ahead. You can. I'm on to my next sheet, but I might as well go back and pick you up since you're here.
Thank you, I had to go relieve the babysitter. First, I want to sincerely thank the staff for their continued work on revising the comprehensive plan. We recognize the long hours and the complexity of the process, and the enormous effort has gone into responding to community feedback. Your commitment is deeply appreciated. The comprehensive plan isn't just another report, it's a blueprint that will shape the future of our city for decades to come. Its policies will guide development, influence zoning decisions, and affect the lives of residents across Evanston for years. With the stakes this high, clarity, accuracy, and community trust are essential. Yet, key issues in the draft are still being debated. At the most recent meeting, the Land Use Commission voted 5-2 to revise a central phrase from increase the housing supply and housing choices to preserve and increase the Evanston's diverse housing choices. This wasn't a minor change. It reflected a significant shift in direction, a call for greater balance, for nuance, and for a vision that supports diversity while respecting the unique character of our neighborhoods. But despite the clear vote, the original language increased the supply still appeared in the draft multiple times, including in the opening policy statement and in section 2. It's not only undermining the commission's recommendation, it risks misrepresenting the values and the priorities of the community, and will not provide clarity when we need it for our zoning talks ahead. On top of that, we learned just the other night that 2 different versions of the draft had been circulating, causing confusion and frustration for residents who have been engaged in good faith to review and comment on the document. These issues, conflicting drafts, unincorporated edits, and key language discrepancies about policy actions, inconsistencies, point to a single unavoidable conclusion: the plan is not ready. We owe it to our community to take the time to get it right. That means producing a clean, corrected version that reflects adopted changes, incorporates public input, and is clearly communicated to its residents. That means getting it right, not rushing it through. After all, sacred text went through a few edits. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Brian Hansen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Brian Hansen from the 6th Ward. And just as you all wrap up your participation in this, I want to thank you, as you've heard from others, for the work you did. fundamentally, democracy is about disagreement. And we set up a whole set of processes to work through that disagreement and come to some sort of pathway forward. And you all, unfortunately, have been, for you guys, at the sharp point of this. And I feel that one of the things that's been unfortunate in this process is the personalization. People can, and I think in our community, we have people who disagree about the outcomes that they want, and some folks who agree about outcomes but want to get there in different ways. And I think you all have come at your jobs with good intention, with pursuing what you truly believe in, and trying to work through these issues. And I hope that we as a community, as this process goes forward, can recognize we can disagree with each other and yet still respect each other and still treat each other with dignity and empathy. I also want to thank the city staff, because the folks who have also taken a lot of heat are the city staff who have just been trying to do and follow the directives they've been given by this commission, by the city council. And it has been a hard path, as we all know. The consulting process didn't go exactly according to plan, and the staff has picked up a huge amount of work as a result. So I just want to say thank you for this process. It's not done. We're going to continue to have debates about this in our city, but thank you for being at the hard end of democracy and working through disagreement to move us forward. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Kira Kelly. I saw you. There you are.
Hello. I did want to go back to the point that Michelle just raised about the Land Use Commission voting previously 5-2 to revise a key phrase in the comprehensive plan from increase the housing supply and housing choices to preserve and increase Evanston's diverse housing choices. As Commissioner Johnson emphasized, this was absolutely a compromise by Lauren Berlin and was recognized as such in media coverage. Evanston Now had a headline, something like, LUC walks back increasing housing supply, something to that effect. The 5-2 vote was significant and should have been reflected accordingly, not just in the introduction of a passage. This walking back undermines the Commission's vote and disregards a meaningful decision made after considerable public input. It also dilutes the voices of many residents. Initially, this seemed like an oversight, but at this point, reducing the compromise to a single line or walking it back feels like a power move. Likewise, the public input engagement section is skewed and incomplete. It overrepresents pro-density, pro-upzoning viewpoints while failing to adequately reflect residents who oppose these positions, who are estimated at the time to outnumber supporters 9-1 in written comments and 4-1 at public meetings. Many of these residents thoroughly reviewed the drafts and submitted detailed comments. Hundreds filled city council chambers for months, submitting well-reasoned arguments and investing hours in document review. Some are more familiar with the draft, perhaps, than some of you. Yet all that was reduced to this line. Meeting attendees expressed a range of opinions and frequently provided conflicting guidance. For example, many attendees voiced support for expanding diversity in housing options to accommodate a wide range of housing needs, and many others spoke out against it. So that's just it. Anyway, the credibility of this process and draft continues to be deeply compromised. We began with the mayor outlining his zoning goals in a Tribune op-ed, followed by a fixed timeline set before his reelection. Then the RFP process was selected our HDR, who brought in ZoneCo and advocated ideas developed by Connections for the Homeless. 2 qualified land use commissioners with urban planning experience were dinged. Staff summaries of feedback heavily leaned toward pro-density. A city manager who seemed to listen to residents and raise concerns and the truth about HDR has now left. Due process has been consistently ignored. This is not what a comprehensive plan should be. It should be informed by and reflect the real input and needs of the community. Frankly, it feels like this plan could have been written at the outset by the mayor, his allies, and Connections for the Homeless. We wonder, after all this time and energy and months, and why bother with residents at all? Many of us feel we don't see ourselves in this plan, not one bit. And also, the final product remains a half-baked Frankenstein-esque document with marked up Google Docs with inconsistencies, partial edits, ideological insertions, backtracks on important votes, and fails to implement earlier suggested revisions. The draft lacks coherence and credibility residents deserve from a 20-year plan. I'm sorry, but this is a fail, and we really deserve better. Thank you.
Next up is Terry Wendt. Is Terry here? I don't think so. All right, after that, Linda Dalmachuk.
I'm feeling overwhelmed by how much there could be to say, and there's just not enough time to cover it all. This is such an unnecessarily rushed land use commission process for something as consequential as a 20-year plan due to political considerations, and that's really sad. I'm also very concerned with the extremely large number of points in the plan that are too vague and poorly defined, that point to very large hidden policy changes. We should have been given an opportunity to discuss these topics chapter by chapter for meaningful input. Something very specific that I really hope that you guys will go back, open up your testimony, and change, and I really regret not being able to speak to this earlier in the evening. There's a very unfortunate sentence in here that I think is inaccurate and very unfair to the people that come here and speak at public comment. So the good news, you put a fact in there. Meeting attendees expressed a range of opinions and frequently provided conflicting guidance. Yes, that is a correct fact. However, the next sentence after that, and I will refer you to page 10, the very bottom, and 11 at the top. Meeting attendees expressed a range of opinions and, on the top of page 11. For example, many attendees voiced support for expanding and diversifying housing options to accommodate a wide range of housing needs. Okay, one group. And many others spoke against it. That's all you had to say? That's all you had to share with the rest of the public about all of the time that all of us have come to speak, to public comment, and give you very specific, very well-reasoned opinions that you've admitted there's two groups of people, but you have given absolutely no valid recognition of what we came to say. And I really ask you to go back and change that sentence because it's incredibly derogatory, I think. I would like you to change it to add, after the end of a wide range of housing needs, to say, by using blanket upzoning of all residential areas, okay? That's what one group came to you and said. Clarify it. Don't make it vague and general and not accurate. Say, that's what they came to. We want upzoning. Okay. And then replace it for just saying others opposed it. I would like you to replace it with, and many others expressed concerns regarding gentrification of lower income areas and resident displacement as an unintended consequence of these policy proposals, as well as supporting the value of retaining single-family home neighborhoods. And I really, really hope that you will do that because not allowing us to speak beforehand, I think, was really an unfortunate decision. Thank you.
Next up is Cecilia Hoskins. Is she still here? Okay, no, and then Sue Greger is my final name. I signed up online. Okay. Did I will get to you guys.
I am Sue Greger from the 2nd Ward.
I think this is a nice idea for people that need affordable housing, but I just truly believe that this is just a pie in the sky idea. That I don't really think there's any developer out there that is going to build anything that is going to give somebody an apartment that is, in my opinion, should be like $600 to $1,000, maybe $1,200 a month. And whether it's a single person, a family, and there's just no developer who's going to do that and charge that low amount of rent. So I think this is just a bunch, I guess it becomes a bunch of baloney. Then that you're striving for that, but it's just never going to happen. And I, being in the second ward, I am petrified that about gentrification, because it's already kind of happening in our neighborhood. And I don't think that's fair to my neighbors who have lived there many, many more years than I have. And I don't want anything to happen to them. I want them to be able to live there for as long as they want to live there. Their families live there. I see generations of families living there, and I just don't think this is going to help. I really do believe that you're going to go for the vulnerable people, and that would be my ward, which is the second ward. And you're going to go after those people because they're not going to be the wealthy people that could fight you with, lawyers and stuff and say, you're not going to take my house away. I'm petrified that you're going to take my house away. And I don't want myself or my neighbors to be all anxious about what you're going to do with my neighborhood and with the situation. And I really think there need to be guardrails, and I just don't see that there are guardrails.
All right, thank you. I think who else? Mary Rosinski, I guess, and who else signed up? And Jeff. But all right. And Mary, give your name and address, please, and I'll write it on my list.
Yeah, so you don't get them when you sign it up online?
I have some that are signed up online, but I don't have
Oh, that's
you.
interesting. All right, well, that's okay. Thank you very much. Mary Rosinski, Caldwell, Mary Rosinski, 1729 Chancellor. You know. Well, I want to say thank you. I know it's been really taxing on you guys, and it's been very taxing on all the residents, and I can't agree more. Everything here that was said, I would have loved to have been able to say it as good as they did. I'm here. I know this is going to council. You guys voted on that. And I'd like to say, we as a community can come to consensus. It doesn't have to be we, this person, or that person. When we did the Central Street Master Plan, it took us about 8 months, 9 months. We actually, the community Central Street neighbors met with zoning. We talked in an office. It wasn't a one-way conversation. It was, oh, they want this. Oh, well, we want this. The city wants this. They want that. That's how we came up with the plan. That's not happening here. And somehow, somewhere, we have to find a way to talk. We can't just say it. And if we're going to plan for our future, for our children's future, for grandchildren's future, we have to talk, and we can come to consensus. And I just want to really say that. The other thing is that now we have a product, but it's not complete. And it's being passed to council. And I think it's critical that this packet be completely, all the data, because the data that's in this is incomplete. I look at Wilmette, I look at Glenview, I look at Northbrook, I look at their comprehensive plans. There's data, and there's graphs, and you can follow stuff. And as Linda Domasic just said, people's thoughts are reflected in that data. It's not just statements. There's a lot of statements in this plan that are unfounded, and there's a number of realtors in this room. I can tell you they're wrong, and they come to false conclusions, and it's really not the type of product Evanston residents deserve. But that being said, this product needs to be complete for the council, and then once council gets it, I would hope and demand that, if I could demand, but that there's 60 to 90 days for the council members to review it, because they're not land use people. They've got a lot on their plate, and then give them time to meet with their residents, and maybe that's where that conversation can happen. So if you can suggest that that's how this could happen, then you would really get meaningful and put it on the council members to talk with their people on it. I have one question, and maybe you'll be able to answer this. On page, I think it's 28, it says the stated goal is diversity in housing. And then on page 77, it says, under housing stock, we have a diverse community. So how come we, housing stock community? We're saying it's a goal, but we're also saying that we have it. That's a very vague goal that I don't know what that means. I don't even know if you guys know what it means, and I don't know where you're going with it. We also need a chapter, as Mr. DeRouche said, on adaptive reuse. If we're talking about environmental, we've got a lot of older houses. We've got a beautiful community. Let's preserve it. And then the biggest thing that I say is my line of business is that, we haven't talked a whole lot about increasing incomes. The median income in this community is for a house is $434,000. You have to be making over $100,000, $80,000 down at 7% to be able to buy that. Less than 48% of our people, or 50% of our people, can even afford that little house, and that includes condos, townhouses, and houses. New construction is $950,000. So anyone who thinks that there is such a thing as building enough new construction for affordability needs to go back to economic school. There is no such thing as trickle-down economic affordable housing. It has to have investment by the city. There has to be, and there's no chapter in this that even states how we're going to get there, and that is a real drawback of where this plan is at. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening. Jeff Barini, Second Ward. I'm going to key off a little bit what Mary teed up there. This is a specific suggestion regarding the housing section. The plan calls for implementing a plan to assess the types and qualities of housing that's needed here in Evanston. But what about quantity? We don't hear anything about that. Yet the housing section is replete with calls for more diversity, more choices, more things like that. But the document, I don't think, fully addresses why we need that. It mentions the challenges we have of affordability, and that's right. It mentions the housing shortage, but that's national information. It would help if we could get a localized picture of that somehow to see what kind of challenges we have in terms of housing shortages here. And this is a comprehensive plan. We're looking to 2045. So if the present housing stock is inadequate, as we look to the future, what would be adequate? Can we provide specifics as to how many more and what type of housing we need here in Evanston, at least as targets, suggested targets? This would allow us to see as how it will address affordability and the challenges of shortages, if they will at all. And I think it'll be essential in judging our progress as we move towards 24/5 and whether or not we have achieved any success in this regard too. Clearly we have an image now of housing and where it fails us. So what do we need specifically to address the future? Anyway, this is not going to be your job. This is a suggestion I hope you'll include for council to fill out as they go forward. And again, thank you very much for your diligence and your time in all of this work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's everybody that I have on my list or who raised their hand. Are we done with public comment? In that case, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is what, next week, right? Next week.